Chapter 2780. Boom, boom, boom. Above the sky, a violent force came crashing down, like a waterfall falling from the sky, falling towards the ground. Rumble, bang, bang, bang. On the ground, the peaks were impacted and collapsed one after another. The entire Holy Soul mountain range was shaking under the impact of the powerful force, as if it was about to be destroyed. Outside the Ice Fire Valley, the giant mountain and giant river brothers looked at the powerful force falling from the void with horrified expressions. However, in the next moment, they rushed into the sky at the same time and released all the power in their bodies, using their bodies as shields to protect the Ice Fire Valley. At this moment, Nyet Tian was cultivating in the Ice Fire Lake, and it was a critical moment. If he was disturbed, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this moment, there was only one thought in the minds of the Giant Mountain Brothers, and that was to protect the Ice Fire Valley even at the cost of their lives. Boom, boom, boom. Above the sky, waves of power came crashing down and bombarded the bodies of the Giant Mountain Brothers, causing them to tremble uncontrollably. At this time, they used the one breath of mountains and rivers, but their strength was too weak. Puff, puff. After a few seconds, the Giant Mountain Brothers trembled at the same time and spat out blood. The power released by the fight between Ye Fenghua and the three Holy Soul Elders was too terrifying. Even if it was just the aftershock, the Giant Mountain Brothers could not resist it. Bang! Bang! In the next moment, Giant Mountain and Giant River finally could not withstand it anymore, and their figures fell at the same time, crashing toward the ground. Then, the terrible power fell and was about to bombard the Ice Fire Valley. Once this kind of power fell, it would definitely be able to directly raze the Ice Fire Valley to the ground. Oh no! Giant Mountain and Giant River were still in the air, and their faces were extremely horrified as they growled at the same time. At this moment, they were not worried about themselves but Nyetian. If the Ice Fire Valley was destroyed, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for Nyetian. Boom! At this critical moment, a powerful force appeared and was instantly released, covering the entire Ice Fire Valley. QL 11-inch bang bang bang. Then, the terrible power fell, but was blocked by the powerful force and instantly collapsed. Giant Mountain and Giant River landed on the ground and steadied themselves. They turned around abruptly and saw an old man standing behind them. It was Hua Iru. Who are you? The Mountain and River Brothers did not know Hua Iru. They were shocked and asked at the same time, "Is Nyet Tian in the valley?" Hua Iru did not answer the two, but asked with a gloomy expression. Ju Shan and Ju He nodded in confusion. They could tell that Hua Iru was here to help, so they felt a lot more at ease. Hua Meng nodded, looked up at the sky with a solemn expression, and said in a deep voice, "This formation can protect Ice Fire Valley. You two stay here and guard it. Don't let anyone come close, understand?" Understood. Ju Shan and Ju He nodded. At this moment, Hua Iru's expression became even more solemn. He sighed in his heart. "Nie Fenghua, why did you come at this time?" He hadn't expected that Nie Fenghua would appear at this time. Fortunately, he had arrived in time and protected Ice Fire Valley with a grand formation. Otherwise, they would have been in big trouble. In fact, this was the first time that Hua Iru had seen Nie Fenghua. He had never expected that the latter's strength would be so heaven-defying. He had his own plans and arrangements for bringing Nie Tian to the Holy Soul Academy. However, Nie Fenghua's sudden appearance had disrupted his plans. At this moment, he was thinking whether Nie Fenghua and Nie Tian would be able to meet each other. At the same time, in the Ice Fire Lake, beads of sweat oozed from Nie Tian's forehead. Although Ice Fire Valley had been saved, the power of the outside world still came in and caused some interference to his breakthrough. Fortunately, Lulu had sealed his connection with the outside world. Otherwise, if he had heard the conversation between Ye Fenghua and the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy, his mind would definitely have been confused and he would have been possessed by the devil. "Nye Tian, you must hold on." Fat Cat secretly prayed, hoping that Nye Tian could smoothly break through. At this moment, Nye Tian was at the most critical stage. As long as he could stabilize his mind, he would soon break through. Outside Icefire Valley, in the sky above the Holy Soul mountain range. After a long time, the endless wild waves finally dissipated slowly, for figures slowly became clear and appeared in everyone's line of sight. It was Nie Fenghua and the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy. At this moment, Nie Fenghua was dripping with blood, and his face was as pale as wax. His body was trembling slightly, like a leaf in the wind that could fall at any time. However, his eyes were still sharp, and his aura was still very stable. Looking at the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy, their bodies were badly mutilated and bloody, as if they had been cut by countless sharp blades. The three of them supported each other and barely stabilized their bodies. Their eyes were trembling in shock and fear. They never dreamed that under the circumstances of using the Holy Soul secret technique, this would actually be the result in front of them. Nie Fenghua was really too powerful. After the fusion of the sword and blade, his aura skyrocketed more than several times. When the crowd below saw the scene in front of them, they were extremely shocked. Anyone could tell that in this clash of extremes, Nie Fenghua had won. The injuries suffered by the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy were obviously more serious than Nie Fenghua's. It was hard to imagine that Nie Fenghua could still have the upper hand when facing the Holy Soul secret technique while fighting one against three. Nie Fenghua was so powerful that it made people tremble. Ow, how is this possible? On the other side, high up in the sky, Tianyu said in horror. His eyes were wide open, and he did not know how to express the shock in his heart. The Holy Soul secret technique of the three elders actually lost to Nie Fenghua. The Holy Soul secret technique was a sacred level martial technique. How could Nie Fenghua defeat a sacred level martial technique? The Holy Soul secret technique was indeed a sacred level martial technique, but the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy were pseudo-saint powerhouses after all, not real sages. Even if the three of them combined their aura, it was only infinitely close to a sage, not a real sage. Therefore, the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy could not display the true power of the Holy Soul secret technique. If the power of a real, sacred level martial technique was displayed, Nie Fenghua would definitely not be able to resist it. Seniors, Nie Fenghua let me win. At this moment, Nie Fenghua's voice sounded. His body shook, and the bloodstains on his body were washed away. Although his face was pale, his aura was still there and extremely sharp. At this moment, if he made a move, he could easily kill the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy. We lost. Situ Batsi's eyes trembled. Although there was great unwillingness in his eyes, he still spoke in a low voice. Du Quang's face was extremely shocked, but he was not afraid. Using all the strength in his body, he growled, "The three elders of the Holy Soul Academy accept our defeat. If you want to kill us or torture us, do as you please. Senior Du Quang, I did not come to the Holy Soul Academy to kill people." Nie Fenghua sneered, then turned his gaze and locked onto the Holy Soul sinful tablet. He returned to the Holy Soul Academy not to kill people, but to erase his name from the Holy Soul sinful tablet. You? Grandma Tang opened her mouth, but just as she was about to speak, her body trembled and she directly vomited blood. They were too heavily injured. Even if they wanted to stop Nie Fenghua, they could not do anything. Moreover, at this moment, no one could stop Nie Fenghua. Nie Fenghua was injured, but it was not fatal. His aura was still there, whether it was Tianyu or the guardian of the Holy Soul sinful tablet. They could not stop him. Seniors, I'm sorry. Nie Fenghua smiled faintly, then suddenly turned around and prepared to walk towards the Holy Soul sinful tablet. Chapter 2781. Broken Blade. Broken Blade. Situ Bai's eyes narrowed when he saw the broken blade in Nie Fenghua's hand, and his mouth twitched. Nie Fenghua was known as the #1 prodigy of the Holy Soul Academy in the past million years, not only because of his talent in martial arts, but also because of his unique martial arts, sword and saber dual cultivation. It was already very impressive for an ordinary martial artist to become a sword or saber wielder. But Nie Fenghua cultivated both the saber Dao and the sword Dao. The most terrifying thing was that his achievements in both the sword and saber Daos were astonishing. Nie Fenghua's attainments in both the sword and saber Daos could be ranked among the top. Nie Fenghua rarely used his sword and saber together, because he could defeat most of his opponents with only his sword or saber. But now, he was finally going to use his sword and saber together against the Holy Soul Three Elders. The Holy Soul Three Elders were rank 9 pseudo-sanctuaries, and any one of them will be a top powerhouse in the Holy Soul domain. With the three of them working together, Nie Fenghua had to use his sword and saber together. Nie Fenghua, do you really want to fight the three of us? Du Kuang's face darkened when he saw the broken blade in Nie Fenghua's hand. I'm here today to erase my name from the Holy Soul Sin Tablet. Nie Fenghua's eyes became even more fearless with his sword and saber in hand, and the murderous intent in his eyes became more violent. He said coldly, "If you don't stop me, I won't pursue the matter of you injuring me just now. How dare you?" Among the Holy Soul Three Elders, Grandma Tang, who had been silent all this while, said in a low voice, "Nie Fenghua, I admit that you are indeed a prodigy, but you're too arrogant. You're the first to challenge the entire Holy Soul Academy in the millions of years since the Academy was founded. We have the intention to let you go, so why bother? If you want to fight, we'll fight with you. You're also the first to force the Holy Soul Three Elders to team up." With that, Grandma Tang's aura surged, and she was clearly prepared for the battle. At this moment, Situ Bai also spoke in a deep voice. "Nie Fenghua, I doesn't know what happened back then. Although you have been designated as a Saint Spirit sinner, in the eyes of I, you are still a student of Saint Spirit Academy. As long as you leave today, I, Situ Bai, will owe you a favor. How about it?" Both Madame Tang and Du Kuang were taken aback by his words. In the distance, Tian Yu also furrowed his brows. His face could not help but stiffen. No one would have thought that Situ Bai would actually say such a thing. Although he didn't say that Dean Saint Soul was wrong, he definitely showed his attitude. He didn't agree with Dean Saint Soul's original practice. More importantly, Situ Bai was still persuading Nie Fenghua to leave and even use his own personal favor. In everyone's eyes, there was no need for Situ Bai to say such a thing in this situation. Nie Fenghua was indeed strong, but he was only one person after all. Furthermore, he had just been injured by the Holy Soul Trio Elders. If the battle continued, the Holy Soul Three Elders would have a higher chance of winning. However, Situ Bai's words seemed to be showing weakness to Nie Fenghua. This made everyone confused. Of course, the others didn't know what Situ Bai was thinking at this moment. Although he didn't have much contact with Nie Fenghua, he could feel that Nie Fenghua was definitely not the kind of scum who would betray his master. Moreover, he sensed that there was a strange force in Nie Fenghua's body that was constantly eroding his martial body. Therefore, if the battle continued, even if Nie Fenghua could win, he would definitely be injured by the strange force in his body. Situ Bai didn't want to see an exceptional genius fall just like that. Apart from that, Situ Bai had another obscure reason. He faintly felt that there was an aura on Nie Fenghua that was very similar to that of Nie Tian. Therefore, he guessed that Nie Fenghua might have a certain relationship with Nie Tian. After Situ Bai's words, Nie Fenghua was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly laughed and said, "Senior Situ, I respect the three of you as elders of the academy and will let the three of you have one move." His calm voice directly shocked everyone. Countless eyes suddenly froze, as if they suspected that they had heard wrongly. Nie Fenghua actually wanted to let the Holy Soul Three Elders have one move. In a duel between experts, life and death was decided in an instant. Especially in a duel between peak experts, one move could decide life and death. Nie Fenghua was obviously at a disadvantage at this moment. Where did his confidence come from? He actually wanted to let the Holy Soul Three Elders have one move. In the next moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Is Nye Fenghua a madman? He's already injured and still dares to speak so arrogantly. This traitor is too arrogant. He simply doesn't put the Holy Soul, three elders in his eyes. He doesn't put the Holy Soul Academy in his eyes. No wonder the dean wanted to expel him from the academy back then. Too arrogant. In my opinion, the dean should have killed this guy back then. Then today's scene wouldn't have happened. The crowd shouted and looked at Nye Fenghua with incomparable hatred. They couldn't wait to tear him into pieces and eat him alive. Nye Fenghua, you're too arrogant. You really don't put us, the Holy Soul, three elders, in your eyes. At this moment, Du Kuang was furious. His eyes were cold and murderous, and his aura was wild. The void behind him also shook. Situ Bai and Grandma Tang were still calm, but they also looked at Nye Fenghua with anger in their eyes. The Holy Soul three elders were peak experts in the entire Holy Soul region. How could they not be angry when they were being looked down upon like this? I'm not looking down on you. I just want to let you guys have one move first, Nye Fenghua said indifferently. His eyes were deep and his expression was like an ancient well, without any fluctuations. At this moment, he really wasn't arrogant. He just felt that he was once a student of the Holy Soul Academy, so he should be polite to the three elders of the academy. I don't care what your mentality is. At this moment, Du Kuang roared. He could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. His aura surged, and he roared, "Since you're looking for death, then don't blame us." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure instantly moved. His palm fiercely slammed down. Suddenly, a violent palm wind stirred up the dark clouds in all directions. Unexpectedly, it formed a black hurricane in the air. It was like a gigantic wave that crashed down on Nye Fenghua. Boom! Suddenly, the void suddenly sank and the space was instantly tightened. The surroundings became dark and gloomy. The eyes of the crowd below trembled. They were extremely shocked. Du Kuang was indeed a rank 9 pseudo-sage. The power of his palm was powerful and extremely terrifying. "Old Du, let me help you." At the moment when Du Kuang made his move, Grandma Tang's voice was heard. She also slammed her palm out. Suddenly, a ball of green light appeared and instantly enveloped the black hurricane. It actually doubled the power of the hurricane. Situ Bai frowned. He had already raised his palm, but in the end, he didn't attack. Chapter 2782. 1 against 3 inch boom. Just as Nye Fenghua raised the broken sword and saber, space suddenly shook. Suddenly, the space within 10,000 meters became distorted under the influence of the saber intent and sword intent. How terrifying! The people below could feel the terrifying saber intent and sword intent from hundreds of thousands of meters away. They couldn't help but tremble in fear. In the next moment, a shield formed by the saber intent and sword intent appeared in front of Nye Fenghua. It was as strong as a mountain, indestructible. Sure enough, he was only defending and not attacking. Boom! Then, the black hurricane fell directly on the saber intent and sword shield. Suddenly, the void shook violently as if it was about to collapse. Boom, boom, boom. Then, an endless force surged and spread in all directions. It was extremely terrifying. Nye Fenghua's figure was affected by the strong impact, and he took a few steps back, but then he steadied himself. After a while, the violent waves in the void dissipated. Nye Fenghua stood in the air with his long hair fluttering in the wind. At this moment, there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His face was slightly pale, but he was not seriously injured. Nye Fenghua, you are indeed the #1 genius. Du Kuang's eyes were cold, and he said in a deep voice. Although he was extremely angry, he couldn't deny that Nye Fenghua was indeed terrifyingly strong. The combined attack of him and Grandma Tang only caused minor injuries to Nye Fenghua. With such strength, Nye Fenghua could be ranked in the top 5 in the entire Sacred Soul Realm. The most terrifying thing was that Nye Fenghua was still so young. According to the age of a godly state warrior, he was still a young warrior. Grandma Tang frowned and her face darkened. She couldn't help but look at Situ Bai. Situbai didn't attack just now. If the three of them had combined their attacks, even Nie Fenghua would have been seriously injured. One move over. We can fight for real now. At this time, Nie Fenghua took a step forward and said in a deep voice. Then he turned his gaze to Situ Bai and said, Senior Situ, you and I are not enemies, but we are now standing on opposite sides. I hope you can respect me and show no mercy. His voice was calm, but it was filled with extreme arrogance. Okay. Situ Bai's eyes narrowed, and the aura around him began to surge. That palm strike, just now, was just a warm-up. The real battle between the four of them was about to begin. Very good. Nie Fenghua laughed insolently and said in a stern voice, Today, let me, broken sword and broken saber, go crazy for once. As the maniacal laughter faded, his entire body began to surge with saber and sword intent. The aura around him soared crazily. The surrounding space seemed to be unable to withstand his aura and shook violently. At this moment, Nie Fenghua's figure was standing high up in the sky, like a saber or a sword. The aura around him was both tyrannical like a saber and sharp like a sword. This person is terrifyingly strong. Situbai looked at Nie Fenghua and felt the saber and sword intent coming from the void. His eyes trembled and his heart trembled. The strength that Nie Fenghua displayed at this moment was extremely terrifying. If a martial artist below the pseudo-sacred fifth stage were to come within 10,000 meters of him, they would probably be crushed to death by the aura of his saber and sword. Such a powerful aura was something that Situ Bai had rarely seen in his life. As for the crowd below, they were even more shocked. Everyone felt a suffocating pressure. Some of the weaker martial artists had already vomited blood several times. Attack! Sensing Nie Fenghua's strength, Du Quan let out a low roar and took the lead to attack. The terrifying black aura around him became thicker and thicker. His entire body seemed to have turned into a dark cloud that rolled out. At the same time, Situ Bai and Granny Tang also attacked. Boom! Boom! Two frightening energies surged forth like giant dragons, crushing towards Nie Fenghua. Good timing. Ha ha! Nie Fenghua was fearless in the face of the joint attack of the three Holy Soul Elders. Instead, he started laughing wildly. His figure shook, and the saber intent around him exploded with a bang. Suddenly, a wild shadow that seemed like a saber yet wasn't a saber, like a sword yet wasn't a sword, and it whistled out and shook the world. Boom! Then the attacks of the Holy Soul, three elders landed directly on the saber and sword light. The void suddenly trembled, and several spatial cracks that were hundreds of meters long appeared in the surrounding space. The strength of Nie Fenghua and the Holy Soul, three elders, was too strong. The first head-on collision actually caused the space-time to tear. In the next moment, the figures of the Holy Soul, three elders, retreated at the same time, as if they had been hit by a violent force. The three of them stabilized their bodies under the shocked gazes of the crowd, but their expressions changed abruptly. The Holy Soul, three elders were rank 9 pseudo-sacred powerhouses, existences that stood at the peak. The three of them attacked at the same time and took the initiative to attack. Even though they had the upper hand, they were still at a disadvantage. Such an outcome was absolutely out of their expectations. The three of them had been in the Holy Soul realm for many years, but this was definitely the first time they had seen such a scene. Nie Fenghua was too strong, too much. The Holy Soul, three elders, are indeed worthy of their reputation. At this time, Nie Fenghua's voice resounded in the void. It was fearless, arrogant, and domineering. It's a pity that in my eyes, you're still too weak. After saying too weak, Nie Fenghua's figure had already moved. Violent saber and sword intent surged around him, sharp and powerful. In the entire Holy Soul realm, Nie Fenghua was definitely the only martial artist who had cultivated both saber and sword intent to such a level. Nie Fenghua, you are too arrogant. Du Quan sensed that Nie Fenghua's aura had become even more powerful, but he wasn't afraid. Instead, he let out a low roar and was the first to charge forward. The black chi surrounding his body became tyrannical, causing the space within tens of thousands of meters to plunge into darkness. Too weak. However, Nie Fenghua sneered again. He stabbed out with a broken sword and saber at the same time. A terrifying force exploded in the void, and the destructive aura seemed to be able to destroy everything. Bang! Immediately, a saber and sword light fell and instantly landed in the space where Du Quang was. There was a muffled sound in the air, and a blood-colored figure fell straight to the ground. It was Du Quang. In front of Nie Fenghua, Du Quang was simply courting death by attacking alone. Old Du! Grandma Tang's eyes trembled, and she screamed. Then, her figure turned into a stream of light and caught Du Quang. With Grandma Tang's help, Du Quang stabilized his body. His whole body was dripping with blood, and it was almost impossible to tell that he was human. One move, just one move, and Nie Fenghua had directly taken half of Du Quang's life. Senior Du Quang, that move just now was my payback to you. Nie Fenghua stood in the sky like a devil, and he said coldly. Previously, Du Quang had injured him, and now he was determined to take revenge. Nie Fenghua, you deserve to die, Grandma Tang growled, and her eyes were filled with hatred and murderous intent. At this moment, the people below were extremely shocked. Who would have thought that when Nie Fenghua was injured, he would first give way and then heavily injure Du Quang in one move? In fact, they did not know that Nie Fenghua had already shown mercy in that move. Otherwise, Du Quang would already be a corpse. Chapter 2783. A voice suddenly rang out in the air, causing Nie Fenghua's gaze to freeze. After that, his expression became extremely gloomy. He was too familiar with this voice, a familiarity that was etched into his bones and heart. Kuyo Onaguchi. In the next moment, Nie Fenghua's pupils constricted. He looked at the sky, and his eyes were filled with hatred. High up in the sky, a black-robed figure descended and stood there like a dark mountain, making people feel incomparably oppressed. This figure was none other than the dean of the Holy Soul Academy and Nie Fenghua's former teacher, Kuyo Onaguchi. Lord Principal. Seeing Gigu Curse World's silhouette, the crowd exclaimed in shock. Who would have thought that Kuyo Onaguchi would appear at this moment? Sidubai's face darkened when he saw Kuyo Onaguchi. His eyes were filled with unconcealable anger. The Holy Soul, 3 elders, and Nie Fenghua were both injured, and Kuyo Onaguchi appeared right after. Could it be a coincidence that his timing was so precise? Grandma Tang and Du Quang's faces darkened as well. They were burning with anger. They were not fools and could tell what was going on. No one would believe that Kuyo Onaguchi was not hiding in the void, waiting for the best time to appear. The Holy Soul, 3 elders instantly felt the anger of being used by someone. Dean. On the other side, Tianyu's eyes lit up when he saw Kuyo Onaguchi. He immediately rushed over and said loudly, Dean, you're back at the right time. Nie Fenghua, that traitor is too arrogant. I hope, Dean. Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes darkened, and he waved his hand to interrupt Tianyu. He then looked at Situ Bai, and the other 2 elders bowed slightly and smiled. 3 elders, you've suffered a loss. Leave the rest to this dean. Gueguyu puffed. Seeing the fake expression on Kuyo Onaguchi's face, Granny Tang felt even more suffocated. She wanted to say something, but spat out another mouthful of blood. Situ Bai hurriedly pulled Grandma Tang back, signaling her to stop talking. 3 elders, I can see that you're badly injured. It's best if you don't stay here. Go back and recuperate. Kuyo Onaguchi smiled faintly, but it was difficult to conceal the sinister look on his face. Du Quang clenched his fists so hard that he wanted to swallow Kuyo Onaguchi alive. At this moment, he felt like a dog that had been thrown aside after being used. Let's go. Situ Batsi's face was gloomy. He didn't say much and left with Grandma Tang and Du Quang. They had already been used by Kuyo Onaguchi, so there was no point in staying here any longer. As for how Kuyo Onaguchi wanted to deal with Nie Fenghua, they had no ability to interfere. QL11, with Kuyo Onaguchi's ruthlessness, he would never allow others to interfere. However, This had caused Nie Fenghua to suffer. If Nie Fenghua was in his peak condition, he would be able to fight with Kuyo Onaguchi. But now his strength was almost depleted, and he was seriously injured. It was obvious that he was no match for Kuyo Onaguchi. Kuyo Onaguchi looked at the three Holy Soul elders' backs as they left, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Then he turned his gaze to Nie Fenghua. Amazing! Nie Fenghua looked at Kuyo Onaguchi without fear in his eyes. Instead, he sneered and said, "Holy Soul Dean, Kuyo Onaguchi. No wonder he's Nie Fenghua's teacher. Nie Fenghua will never learn such despicable and shameless methods." At this moment, the anger in Nie Fenghua's heart had reached its peak. He could understand, even if he used his toes to think. Previously, it was not that Kuyo Onaguchi was not in the academy, but that he had been avoiding him. There was no doubt that Kuyo Onaguchi had seen the battle just now. Kuyo Onaguchi was indeed insidious. He did not have the confidence to fight Nie Fenghua head-on, so he used the three Holy Soul elders to weaken Nie Fenghua. This method was shrewd and vicious. Nie Fenghua, you're worthy of being my Kuyo Onaguchi's disciple. Kuyo Onaguchi smiled coldly and said without hesitation, "The strength that you displayed just now, even I have to be wary of you. Is that so?" Nie Fenghua's eyes were extremely gloomy, and he said coldly, "Then the strength that I'm going to display next will make you even more wary." As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura was released from his body again, surging into space like the sea. "Oh!" Kuyo Onaguchi smiled playfully and said disdainfully, "Nie Fenghua, you're already in this state, and you still want to fight with me. Aren't you looking down on me a little too much?" At this moment, everyone was stunned. Nie Fenghua was so heavily injured, but he still wanted to fight with Kuyo Onaguchi. Humph. Suddenly, Nie Fenghua laughed coldly and said as if he had gone mad, "Kuyo Onaguchi, you want me to put you in my eyes and in my heart. But do you even look like a teacher at all? I treat you like a teacher, but you treat me like a dog. In your eyes, I've never been a disciple, but a pawn, a dog, right?" As his deranged voice fell, the murderous intent in Nie Fenghua's eyes became even more intense. In the eyes of outsiders, he was once Kuyo Onaguchi's disciple. What kind of glory was that? When he left the academy, he was also regarded as a scum who betrayed his teacher. But only he himself knew how ridiculous this master-disciple relationship between him and Kuyo Onaguchi was. In Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes, Nie Fenghua was never a disciple, but a tool, a pawn, a dog. When everyone heard Nie Fenghua's words, they were dumbfounded and did not know how to express the shock in their hearts. Kuyo Onaguchi looked at Nie Fenghua and smiled. His smile was very sinister and unscrupulous. Then, the corner of his mouth trembled, and his gaze was extremely cold. He transmitted his voice to Nie Fenghua and said, "Nie Fenghua, you're worthy of being my disciple. Master's many years of nurturing is not in vain. You can see things so clearly. It's just a pity that you're too stupid. You shouldn't have come back, and you shouldn't have made a move before seeing Master. The thing that Master left in your body is not a gift. You've really surprised Master that you're able to live until today. In today's battle between Master and disciple, you're destined to lose. After your death, your name will forever be engraved on the Holy Soul Sinful Monument. Whether it was in the past, now, or in the future, when people mention Nie Fenghua, they will remember him as a traitor, a scum." Every word was like a steel needle stabbing into Nie Fenghua's heart, causing him to become even more deranged. "Kuyo Onaguchi, you're lying. Nie Fenghua's eyes trembled violently, and his face twisted into a frightening expression. He yelled at the top of his voice, as if he had lost control of his mind. He wanted to erase his name from the Holy Soul Sinful Monument in order to clear his name. Kuyo Onaguchi's words had poked at his sore spot. How could he not be enraged and mad? Nie Fenghua, no one knows a disciple better than me. Kuyo Onaguchi looked at Nie Fenghua as the corner of his lips curled up slightly, and he sneered in his heart, "I'm well aware of your inner demons. The crazier you are, the stronger the curse mark in your body is. There's no need for me to do anything. The curse mark in your body is enough to kill you. Ah. Chapter 2784. An ultimate battle. Situ Bai frowned and looked extremely solemn, as if he was facing a heavy decision. Situ, let's do it. Du Quang's expression turned better, but his eyes were filled with bloodlust as he shouted, "Are the three elders going to?" Tian Yu seemed to have thought of something as his expression changed and his whole body began to tremble. "It seems that I have underestimated the three elders." Nie Fenghua also saw the clues at this moment, but he sneered and said, "Three seniors, what other trump cards do you have? Feel free to use them. I will fight you to the end." "Nie Fenghua, can you really not leave?" Situ Bai suddenly raised his head, his eyes filled with helplessness. "Senior Situ, Nie Fenghua, have my own principles. Please don't have any misgivings and attack with ease." Nie Fenghua smiled indifferently and said loudly, "If Nie Fenghua loses today or dies in the hands of the three elders, it is Nie Fenghua's fate." Situ Bai looked at Nie Fenghua with a solemn and painful expression. "Situ, he asked for it. Don't blame us," Du Quang said fiercely. Situ Bai's eyes suddenly trembled, and he said coldly, "Nie Fenghua, since you insist, then don't blame I." Then he looked at Grandma Tang and Du Quang and nodded heavily. "Okay." Grandma Tang and Du Quang responded at the same time. Then they moved towards Situ Bai. The people below saw the three elders gathering together and seemed to be about to do something. They couldn't help but tremble, not knowing what the three were going to do. Boom! Boom! Situ Bai and the other two looked at each other and then began to release their aura crazily. The three auras were vast and extremely terrifying, as if they were going to tear the sky apart. At the next moment, a strange scene happened. The three auras actually merged in the sky. Suddenly, the terrifying pressure increased crazily like thousands of wild waves surging in the void. The surrounding space instantly became distorted as if it couldn't hold on any longer. "Huh?" Nie Fenghua frowned slightly and felt strange. The attributes of Situ Bai and the other two were clearly different. How could they fuse into one? As expected, on the other side, Tian Yu's face was filled with horror. His pair of small eyes widened to the maximum as he said in shock, "Saint Soul, secret skill." He had a hunch that the Holy Soul three elders were going to use the legendary Holy Soul secret technique. Now that he saw the three old men's auras merging into one, he concluded that the three of them were using the Saint Soul secret technique. The Saint Soul secret technique had always been a legend of the Saint Soul Academy, and no one had ever seen it before. It was rumored that the Sacred Soul secret technique was a sage-ranked martial technique. It was extremely terrifying. Because the Sacred Soul domain didn't have any true Sage Realm warriors, it was impossible for anyone to practice the Sacred Soul secret technique under normal circumstances. However, there was a legend that said that if multiple pseudo-sage pinnacle cultivators were to cultivate together, it was possible for them to master the Sacred Soul secret art. Tian Yu had heard a long time ago that the Sacred Soul three elders had mastered the Sacred Soul secret technique. However, he did not believe it until he saw it with his own eyes. His eyes were burning with passion. He wanted to see with his own eyes how powerful the legendary saint rank martial skill was. Nie Fenghua could sense that the aura released by the Sacred Soul three elders was getting stronger. His expression changed slightly, and his determined eyes started to waver. The strength displayed by the Holy Soul three elders was simply too powerful. Even Nie Fenghua couldn't help but be shocked at this moment. "It seems like I have underestimated them." Nie Fenghua narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, "Do I have to use that move on the three of them?" Everyone looked at the Sacred Spirit three elders with their hearts trembling in astonishment. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, no one would believe that there was such a powerful existence in the Sacred Soul domain. "Nie Fenghua, it's not too late if you stop now." The aura of the Sacred Soul three elders was getting stronger and more violent. Situbai's voice was heard again. He was willing to give Nie Fenghua one last chance. He believed that no one would be able to resist the sacred soul secret technique. Seniors, Nie Fenghua, have learned a thing or two. However, Nie Fenghua acted as if he did not hear Situbai's words. He shouted loudly and moved his hands at the same time. In the next moment, a strange scene took place. The broken sword and the broken saber in his hands had merged into one. The strange scene stunned the sacred soul three elders, and they had a strange expression on their faces. Who would have thought that Nie Fenghua's broken sword and the broken saber could merge into one? The moment the broken sword and the broken saber merged into one, Nie Fenghua's aura changed abruptly. His aura surged several times, and he was like a giant standing on top of a mountain. His aura shook the heavens and the earth, making everyone's heart tremble. In the next moment, Nie Fenghua's body suddenly released a terrifying saber radiance that covered the sky and earth. It was powerful and sharp. In an instant, the saber radiance and the sword radiance filled the entire sky and earth. The surrounding space was illuminated, and it was dazzling and gorgeous. However, everyone knew that under this dazzling scene, there was a terrifying killing intent. Attack! At this moment, Situbai's voice was heard. Instantly, the sacred soul, three elders moved together, and a violent aura around them exploded. Then, a giant blood-colored hand appeared in the sky. The terrifying aura was like the Milky Way falling. In the next moment, the giant blood-colored hand fell, and a deep roar was heard in the void. It was as if the heavens and earth could not withstand this power and were groaning. Boom! A majestic and boundless force spread out in the void and landed on the ground. Everyone felt their hearts sink, as if someone had pressed down on their chest with a 10,000-kilogram boulder. Puff! 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 Countless people vomited blood, and their faces were extremely pale. They directly fell to the ground. In the sky, Nie Fenghua's figure moved. The saber intent and sword intent in his body fused together in an instant, and a saber and sword radiance appeared. It was like a giant dragon that had been trapped in the abyss for thousands of years, and it roared towards the sky. Boom! The giant blood-colored hand and the saber and sword radiance whistled in the sky. It was as if two ancient beasts were charging at each other. Countless pairs of eyes were shocked to the extreme as they stared at the scene in the sky with a burning gaze. Rumble! In the next moment, the two extreme powers finally collided with each other. Suddenly, there was a loud bang in the sky. Endless crazy power raged and spread in all directions. Crack, crack, crack. The terrifying and berserk energy was extremely destructive. The surrounding space couldn't withstand it and began to crack apart. Boom, boom, boom. Then, a space-time storm appeared and stirred the void. It was terrifying and crazy, as if the end of the world had arrived. Chapter 2785. Not to kill. Boom, boom, boom. High up in the sky, a violent force came crashing down like a waterfall falling from the sky, falling towards the ground. Rumble, boom, boom, boom. On the ground, the peaks were hit and collapsed one after another. The entire Holy Soul Mountain range was shaking under the impact of the powerful force, as if it was about to be destroyed. Outside the Ice Fire Valley, the giant mountain and giant river brothers looked at the powerful force falling from the sky with horrified expressions. However, in the next moment, they rushed into the sky at the same time and released all the power in their bodies, using their bodies as shields to protect the Ice Fire Valley. At this moment, Niet Tian was cultivating in the Ice Fire Lake, and it was a critical moment. If he was disturbed, the consequences would be unimaginable. The giant mountain brothers only had one thought at this moment, and that was to protect the Ice Fire Valley even at the cost of their lives. Boom! Above the sky, waves of power came crashing down and bombarded the giant mountain brothers, causing them to tremble uncontrollably. At this time, they used the one breath of mountains and rivers, but their strength was too weak. Puff! Puff! After a few seconds, the giant mountain brothers trembled at the same time and spat out blood. The power released by the fight between Ye Fenghua and the three Holy Soul Elders was too terrifying. Even if it was just the aftershock, the giant mountain brothers could not resist it. Bang! Bang! In the next moment, Giant Mountain and Giant River finally could not withstand it anymore and fell to the ground at the same time. Then, the terrible power fell and was about to hit the Ice Fire Valley. Once this kind of power fell, it would definitely be able to directly raise the Ice Fire Valley to the ground. Oh no! Giant Mountain and Giant River were still in the sky, and their faces were extremely horrified as they growled at the same time. At this moment, they were not worried about themselves, but Nietian. If the Ice Fire Valley was destroyed, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for Nietian. Boom! At this critical moment, a powerful force appeared and was instantly released, covering the entire Ice Fire Valley. Bang! 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 Then, the terrible power fell, but it was blocked by the powerful force and instantly collapsed. Giant Mountain and Giant River landed on the ground and steadied themselves. They turned around abruptly and saw an old man standing behind them. It was Hua Iru. Who are you? The Mountain and River brothers did not know Hua Iru. They were shocked and asked at the same time, "Is Nietian in the valley?" Hua Iru did not answer the two, but asked with a gloomy expression. Ju Shan and Ju He nodded in confusion. They could tell that Hua Iru was here to help, so they felt a lot more at ease. Hua Meng nodded, looked up at the sky with a solemn expression, and said in a deep voice, "This formation can protect Ice Fire Valley. You two stay here and guard it. Don't let anyone come close, understand?" Understood. Ju Shan and Ju He nodded. At this moment, Hua Iru's expression became even more solemn. He sighed in his heart. "Nie Fenghua, why did you come at this time?" He hadn't expected that Nie Fenghua would appear at this time. Fortunately, he had arrived in time and protected Ice Fire Valley with a grand formation. Otherwise, they would have been in big trouble. In fact, this was the first time that Hua Iru had seen Nie Fenghua. He had never expected that the latter's strength would be so heaven-defying. He had his own plans and arrangements for bringing Nie Tian to the Holy Soul Academy. However, Nie Fenghua's sudden appearance had disrupted his plans. At this moment, he was thinking whether Nie Fenghua and Nie Tian would be able to meet each other. At the same time, in the Ice Fire Lake, beads of sweat oozed from Nie Tian's forehead. Although Ice Fire Valley had been saved, the power of the outside world still came in and caused some interference to his breakthrough. Fortunately, Lulu had sealed his connection with the outside world. Otherwise, if he had heard the conversation between Nie Fenghua and the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy, his mind would definitely have been confused and he would have been possessed by the devil. "Nie Tian, you must hold on." Fat Cat secretly prayed, hoping that Nie Tian could smoothly break through. At this moment, Nie Tian was at the most critical stage. As long as he could stabilize his mind, he would soon break through. Outside Ice Fire Valley, in the sky above the Holy Soul mountain range. After a long time, the endless wild waves finally dissipated slowly, for figures slowly became clear and appeared in everyone's line of sight. It was Nie Fenghua and the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy. At this moment, Nie Fenghua was dripping with blood and his face was as pale as wax. His body was trembling slightly, like a leaf in the wind that could fall at any time. However, his eyes were still sharp and his aura was still very stable. Looking at the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy, their bodies were badly mutilated and bloody, as if they had been cut by countless sharp blades. The three of them supported each other and barely stabilized their bodies. Their eyes were trembling in shock and fear. They never dreamed that under the circumstances of using the Holy Soul secret technique, this would actually be the result in front of them. Nie Fenghua was really too powerful. After the fusion of the sword and blade, his aura skyrocketed more than several times. When the crowd below saw the scene in front of them, they were extremely shocked. Anyone could tell that in this clash of extremes, Nie Fenghua had won. The injuries suffered by the three elders of the Holy Soul Academy were obviously more serious than Nie Fenghua's. It was hard to imagine that Nie Fenghua could still have the upper hand when facing the Holy Soul Secret technique while fighting one against three. Nie Fenghua was so powerful that it made people's hair stand on end. How is this possible? On the other side of the sky, Tianyu said in horror. His eyes were wide open, and he did not know how to express the shock in his heart. The Holy Soul Secret technique of the three elders actually lost to Nie Fenghua. The Holy Soul Secret technique with a holy rank martial skill. How could Nie Fenghua defeat a holy rank martial skill? The Holy Soul Secret technique was indeed a holy rank martial skill, but the three elders were pseudo-saint powerhouses after all, not real sages. Even if the three of them combined their aura, it was only infinitely close to a sage, not a real sage. Therefore, the three elders could not unleash the true power of the Holy Soul Secret technique. If the power of a real holy rank martial skill was unleashed, Nie Fenghua would definitely not be able to resist it. Seniors, Nie Fenghua let me win. At this moment, Nie Fenghua's voice sounded. His body shook and the blood on his body was washed away. Although his face was pale, his aura was still there and extremely sharp. At this moment, if he attacked, he could easily kill the three elders of the Holy Soul sect. We lost. Situ Batsi's eyes trembled. Although there was great unwillingness in his eyes, he still spoke in a low voice. Du Kuang's face was extremely shocked, but he was not afraid. Using all the strength in his body, he growled, "The three elders of the Holy Soul sect have lost wholeheartedly. If you want to kill us or torture us, do as you please. Senior Du Kuang, I did not come to the Holy Soul Academy to kill people." Nie Fenghua laughed coldly. Then, he turned and locked his gaze on the Holy Soul Sin Tablet. He returned to the Holy Soul Academy not to kill people, but to erase his name from the Holy Soul Sin Tablet. You, uffed. Grandma Tang opened her mouth, but just as she was about to speak, her body trembled and she directly vomited blood. They were too heavily injured. Even if they wanted to stop Nie Fenghua, they could not do anything. Moreover, at this moment, no one could stop Nie Fenghua. Nie Fenghua was injured, but it was not fatal. His aura was still there. Whether it was Tianyu or the guardian of the Sin Tablet, they could not stop him. Seniors, I'm sorry. Nie Fenghua smiled faintly. Then, he suddenly turned and prepared to walk towards the Holy Soul Sin Tablet. Chapter 2786. Shameless. A voice suddenly rang out in the air, causing Nie Fenghua's gaze to freeze. After that, his expression became extremely gloomy. He was too familiar with this voice, a familiarity that was etched into his bones and heart. Kuyo Onaguchi. In the next moment, Nie Fenghua's pupils shrank as he looked at the sky. The hatred in his eyes was as violent as flames. A figure in black descended from the sky. He stood there like a dark mountain, making people feel incomparably oppressed. This figure was none other than the dean of the Holy Soul Academy and Nie Fenghua's former teacher, Kuyo Onaguchi. Lord Principal. Seeing Gigu Curse World's silhouette, the crowd exclaimed in shock. Who would have thought that Kuyo Onaguchi would appear at this time? Situbai's face darkened when he saw Kuyo Onaguchi. His eyes were filled with unconcealable anger. The Holy Soul Three Elders and Nie Fenghua were both injured, and Kuyo Onaguchi appeared right after. Could it be a coincidence that he grasped the timing so well? Grandma Tang and Du Kuang's faces darkened as well. They were burning with anger. They were not fools. They could tell what was going on. If Kuyo Onaguchi was not hiding in the sky, waiting for the best time to appear, no one would believe it. The Holy Soul Three Elders instantly felt the anger of being used by someone. Dean. On the other side, Tianyu's eyes lit up when he saw Kuyo Onaguchi. He immediately rushed over and said loudly, "Dean, you're back at the right time. Nie Fenghua, that traitor, is too arrogant." "I hope, Dean." Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes darkened. He waved his hand and interrupted Tianyu's words. He then looked at Situbai and the other two elders. He bowed slightly and smiled. "Three elders, you've suffered a loss. Leave the rest to this dean." Guyu, puff. Seeing the fake expression on Kuyo Onoguchi's face, Granny Tang felt even more suffocated. She wanted to say something, but spat out another mouthful of blood. Situ Bai hurriedly pulled Grandma Tang back, signaling her to stop talking. "Three elders, I can see that you're badly injured. It's best if you don't stay here. Go back and recuperate." Kuyo Onoguchi smiled faintly, but it was difficult to conceal the sinister look on his face. Du Kwang clenched his fist so hard that he wanted to swallow Kuyo Onoguchi alive. At this moment, he felt like a dog that had been thrown aside after being used. "Let's go." Situ Batsi's face was gloomy. He didn't say much and left with Grandma Tang and Du Kwang. They had already been used by Kuyo Onoguchi, so there was no point in staying here any longer. As for how Kuyo Onoguchi wanted to deal with Nie Fenghua, they had no ability to interfere. Based on Kuyo Onoguchi's ruthlessness, he would never allow anyone to interfere. It was just that in this way, it caused Nie Fenghua to suffer. If Nie Fenghua was in his peak condition, he would be able to fight with Kuyo Onoguchi. But now his strength was almost exhausted, and he was seriously injured. Obviously, he wasn't a match for Kuyo Onoguchi. Kuyo Onoguchi looked at the three Holy Soul elders' backs as they left, and his lips curled up slightly. Then, he turned his gaze to Nie Fenghua. Impressive. Nie Fenghua looked at Kuyo Onoguchi without fear in his eyes. He sneered and said, "Holy Soul Dean, Kuyo Onoguchi. No wonder he's Nie Fenghua's teacher. Nie Fenghua will never learn such despicable and shameless methods." At this moment, the anger in Nie Fenghua's heart had reached its peak. Even if he used his toes to think, he could understand that Kuyo Onoguchi wasn't not in the academy at all, but had been avoiding him. There was no doubt that Kuyo Onoguchi had seen the battle just now. Kuyo Onoguchi was indeed insidious. He didn't have the confidence to fight Nie Fenghua head-on, so he used the three Holy Soul Elders to weaken Nie Fenghua. This method was shrewd and vicious. "Nie Fenghua, you're worthy of being my Kuyo Onoguchi's disciple." Kuyo Onoguchi smiled coldly and said without hesitation, "The strength you displayed just now, even I have to be wary of you. Is that so?" Nie Fenghua's eyes were extremely gloomy, and he said coldly, "Then the strength I'm going to display next will make you even more wary." As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura was released from his body again, surging into space like the sea. "Oh!" Kuyo Onoguchi smiled playfully and said disdainfully, "Nie Fenghua, you're already in this state, and you still want to fight with me. Aren't you looking down on me a little too much?" At this moment, everyone was stunned. Nie Fenghua was so heavily injured, but he still wanted to fight with Kuyo Onoguchi. Humph. Suddenly, Nie Fenghua laughed coldly, as if he had gone mad, and said, "Kuyo Onoguchi, you want me to look up to you? Put you in my heart. But do you even look like a teacher at all? I see you as my teacher, but you see me as a dog. In your eyes, I've never been a disciple, but a pawn, a dog, am I right?" As his deranged voice fell, the killing intent in Nie Fenghua's eyes became even more intense. In the eyes of outsiders, he was once Kuyo Onoguchi's disciple, and that was an honor. When he left the academy, he was regarded as a scum who betrayed his teacher. But only he himself knew how ridiculous this master-disciple relationship between him and Kuyo Onoguchi was. In Kuyo Onoguchi's eyes, Nie Fenghua was never a disciple, but a tool, a pawn, a dog. When everyone heard Nie Fenghua's words, their expressions were sluggish, and they didn't know how to express the shock in their hearts. Kuyo Onoguchi looked at Nie Fenghua, but he smiled. His smile was very sinister, and his smile was very unscrupulous. Immediately, the corner of his mouth trembled, and his gaze was extremely cold. He transmitted his voice to Nie Fenghua, saying, "Nie Fenghua, you're worthy of being my disciple." Master's many years of nurturing didn't go to waste. You can see things so clearly. It's just a pity that you're too stupid. You shouldn't have come back, and you shouldn't have made a move before seeing Master. What I've left in your body is not a gift. You've really surprised Master that you're able to live until today. In today's battle between master and disciple, you're destined to lose. After your death, your name will forever be engraved on the holy soul sinful monument. Whether it was in the past, now, or in the future, when people mention Nye Fenghua, they will remember him as a traitor, a piece of trash. Every word was like a steel needle stabbing into Nye Fenghua's heart, causing him to become even more deranged. Kuyo Anaguchi, you're lying, you're lying, you're lying. Nye Fenghua's eyes flickered wildly, and his face contorted in a terrifying manner. He yelled at the top of his voice, as if he had lost control of his mind. He wanted to erase his name from the holy soul sinful monument, to clear his name. Kuyo Anaguchi's words had hit his sore spot. How could he not be enraged and mad? Nye Fenghua, no one knows a disciple better than me. Kuyo Anaguchi looked at Nye Fenghua, and the corner of his lips curled up slightly as he sneered in his heart. I know what the demon in your heart is. The more deranged you are, the stronger the curse in your body will be. I don't need to do anything. The curse in your body is enough to kill you. At that instant, Nye Fenghua suddenly let out a heart-wrenching cry. Chapter 2787. High up in the sky, Nye Fenghua's entire body became distorted. His face was hideous and terrifying as he faced the sky and let out a heart-wrenching scream. When the crowd below saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. They did not know what had happened. Nye Fenghua was fine just a moment ago. Why did he suddenly become in such pain? It was as if he was being ravaged by a terrifying force. Nye Fenghua, you are still a chess piece in the end. You can't overturn the heavens. Kuyo Anaguchi looked at Nye Fenghua and laughed coldly in his heart. His eyes were cold and cruel. At this moment, the terrifying power within Nye Fenghua's body became even more terrifying. It was like a berserk beast was wreaking havoc within his martial body. What's wrong with Nye Fenghua? He seems to have lost control. The crowd looked at Nye Fenghua from afar, and their hearts were filled with shock. It was as if Nye Fenghua had fallen into a state of madness. His entire divine sense was completely out of control. But at this moment, Nye Fenghua's entire body suddenly surged with blood energy. The dripping blood dyed the sky red, causing the world around him to turn dark red. Boom! In the next moment, the aura around Nye Fenghua's body began to skyrocket. His aura became stronger and stronger, like an erupting volcano. The surging aura filled the air. Kuyo Anaguchi felt the incoming pressure and could not help but narrow his eyes. His expression also changed as he said cold, Nye Fenghua, you are courting death. Can you still live after releasing the power of the Saint's Soul curse mark? Saint's Soul curse mark. Nye Fenghua was the same as Nye Tian. Kuyo Anaguchi had also planted the Saint's Soul curse mark in his body, and at this moment, Nye Fenghua had actually used his blood energy as the price to completely release the power of the Saint's Soul curse mark. He wanted to use the Saint's Soul curse mark to stimulate the potential of his martial body and make a final gamble. Kuyo Anaguchi, even if I die today, I will drag you down with me. High up in the sky, Nye Fenghua's long hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes were scarlet red like blood. His entire person was like a demon god. Kuyo Anaguchi's face darkened, but he sneered and said coldly, Nye Fenghua, you're too naive. Do you really think that releasing the power of the Holy Soul curse mark will allow you to fight me? You'll only know if you try. Nye Fenghua's eyes were vicious, and the bloody aura around her grew even stronger. Kuyo Anaguchi sneered and said loudly, since that's the case, I'll let you die knowing. As soon as he finished speaking, his body shook. Immediately, rays of golden light surged out of his body and circulated in the air. It was blinding. As for the golden light, it instantly exploded and turned into rays of light that spread in all directions. It was like circles of golden ripples that shone with boundless radiance. Oh my God, what kind of power is this? Why is it so powerful? The crowd below looked at Gu and felt his aura. Their expressions changed. Their eyes trembled and their hearts screamed. Kuyo Anaguchi stood high up in the sky. His body was covered in golden light, and he looked like the sun. Kuyo Anaguchi. Nie Fenghua looked at Kuyo Anaguchi, and her eyes were filled with hatred. She was so angry that she couldn't say a word. QL11 at this moment, the power that Kuyo Anaguchi was using was the God-sealing power. Kuyo Anaguchi's God-sealing power was taken from Nie Fenghua. Nie Fenghua, I gave you the Holy Soul curse mark. Since you're using the power that I gave you, I'll use your power too. Kuyo Anaguchi smiled coldly and said, Kuyo Anaguchi, you're despicable. Nie Fenghua was completely enraged. She roared and moved. The broken sword and blade appeared in her hands again. They merged together and slashed down in the sky. Boom! Suddenly, the void trembled. The blood-colored blade and sword appeared and whistled in the sky. There was a faint whine, like the sigh of a hero at the end of his road. What good Nie Fenghua? Even in this state, the power that she can unleash is still so strong. Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes narrowed, and he was shocked. At this moment, when he was facing Nie Fenghua's attack, he actually felt threatened. He thought that if Nie Fenghua wasn't injured, he might not be a match for her. He really didn't expect that in just a few decades, Nie Fenghua would grow to such a terrifying extent. This time I must kill him. Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes turned cold, and he said viciously. He felt threatened by Nie Fenghua. If he allowed Nie Fenghua to continue to grow, he would surpass him very soon. My good disciple Dai. The next moment, Kuyo Anaguchi said coldly. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Then he stretched out his hand and slapped down. Boom! Suddenly, a golden palm print appeared in the void. It was tens of thousands of meters long, and it came crashing down. In this attack, not only did Kuyo Anaguchi use the God-sealing force, but he also combined it with the Saint Spirit Chi. The power of the God-sealing force was stimulated to the extreme. Boom! Two terrifying forces collided in the void. Heaven and earth shook and the space trembled. At the same time, in the ice-fire lake, Nie Tion suddenly felt that the divine demon force in his body had been stimulated. It suddenly became active and violent, and he couldn't control it for a moment. Boom! In an instant, the God-sealing force that Lulu had formed was directly broken by the divine demon force. Nie Tion immediately regained his senses of the outside world. He sensed a familiar aura coming from the void, causing his heart to flutter. God-sealing force, he exclaimed in his heart. He couldn't wait to stand up. He felt the God-sealing force, which meant that the person outside was definitely his father. However, at this moment, he was at the last moment of a breakthrough. If he stood up now, not only would all his previous efforts be in vain, but his martial body would also be affected. Nie Tion, hold on until the last moment. Don't be impulsive. Fat Cat felt that Nie Tion's breathing was a little unstable and hurriedly shouted. Nie Tion answered. He calmed his mind, stabilized his breathing, and began to attack the peak of the immortal state. In the outside world, high up in the sky, boom, under the gaze of countless people, the two violent forces collided with each other. Suddenly, the void trembled and a roar was heard. Boom, 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 chi, chi, chi. Then, waves of violent forces surged, and the sky kept emitting ear-piercing sounds. Hua, hua, hua. In the void, the space was slowly torn apart. A frightening space-time storm surged out like a wild beast that had been trapped for a long time. The two figures in the sky were completely submerged. They couldn't even see their shadows. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and their expressions were shocked to the extreme. At this moment, the most incredible thing to the crowd was Nie Fenghua. Who would have thought that Nie Fenghua could burst out such a powerful force when he was seriously injured? Rumble! An endless force came crashing down from the sky. The entire St. Soul mountain range seemed like it was going to collapse. Outside the ice-fire valley, Hua Iru's formation blocked the impact from the sky. At the same time, in the ice-fire lake, a figure suddenly stood up and opened his eyes, which were extremely fierce. Chapter 2788. In the ice-fire lake, Nietion suddenly stood up. The aura around him was several times stronger than before. His eyes were extremely fierce, and his whole body exuded a strange look. At this time, he had absorbed the power of the blood yuan of the saint's soul and successfully broken through to the peak of the divine state. Father! Nietion's eyes suddenly shrank, and then he directly rushed out of the valley. Nietion! Hua Yiru's eyes trembled when he saw Nietion appear. Then he felt Nietion's aura and said in surprise, "You have broken through." He really broke through. The brothers of Jushan and Ju he were extremely shocked and shouted in unison. They had seen with their own eyes that Nietion had successfully broken through to the peak of the divine state in just a few days. It was really terrifying. Yes, Nietion nodded and did not say anything more. He suddenly raised his head and looked up into the sky. Above the sky, endless wild power roared, and it was chaotic. There was no figure at all. Nietion. Huairu knew what Nietion was thinking. He took a step forward and pressed a hand on the latter's shoulder. Nietion did not say anything. His eyes trembled slightly as he stared at the void. Bang! At this time, there was a muffled sound in the sky, and then a blood-colored figure suddenly fell, leaving a bloody trail in the air. Hua Yiru's eyes narrowed as he looked at the blood-colored figure in the distance. The corner of his mouth could not help but tremble, and he shouted a name, Nie Fenghua. Father! Nietion's pupils shrank as his expression flickered. He stomped the ground, and a pair of star soul wings appeared on his back. Like a streak of light, he shot up into the sky and shot towards the blood-colored figure that was falling from the sky. He was very fast, and in an instant he arrived and steadily caught Nie Fenghua. Father! Nietion held Nie Fenghua with both hands, his eyes trembling and hot tears rolling down his face. This was the first time he saw his father, but the resonance between their bloodlines made him unable to calm down. Nie Fenghua's body was a mass of blood and gore, and her aura was weak. She was on the verge of death. With great difficulty, she opened her eyes and looked at Nietion. Her mouth trembled, but she was too weak to speak. She passed out. The moment he fainted, an indescribable joy appeared in his eyes. Even if his divine sense was very vague, he was absolutely certain that the face in front of him was his son, Nietion. He saw his own son. Although it was just a glance, it was enough to make him satisfied. Father! Seeing that Nie Fenghua had fainted, Nietion let out a howl of pain. He immediately unleashed the power of the Earth Vein's essence, sending it into Nie Fenghua's body. However, Nie Fenghua's aura was getting weaker and weaker, as if it could disappear at any time. Nietion's entire body trembled as he unleashed even more of the Earth String Source's power. Unfortunately, it seemed to be too late. The life force in Nie Fenghua's body was getting weaker and weaker, and it was about to disappear. At this moment, the crowd below was completely stunned. No one had expected Nietion to appear at this time. Even more shocking was that Nietion was Nie Fenghua's son. That silver kid is the traitor Nie Fenghua's son. The traitor's son will definitely be a traitor in the future. Our Holy Soul Academy doesn't need a traitor like him. His father was a traitor, and he died at the hands of the dean. Do you think the dean will let him go? As the crowd discussed, they looked at Nietion and his son with vicious gazes, as if Nietion was their mortal enemy. Nietion, so you're Nie Fenghua's son. That's a surprise. At this moment, Ghost Valley's curse world appeared in the sky. He stared at Nietion with a pair of cold eyes and said in a deep voice. He had sensed that Nietion and Nie Fenghua had some sort of relationship, but he hadn't expected the two to be so close. At this moment, Kuyo Onaguchi's aura was surging, but there was a wound on his shoulder and there was a bloodstain at the corner of his mouth. In the exchange just now, he defeated Nie Fenghua, but he was also injured. QL11, he had to admit that Nie Fenghua's strength was indeed terrifying. If it was a fair fight, he would at most have a 50% chance of winning. It's you. Nietion suddenly heard Kuyo Onaguchi's voice, and his eyes immediately shot out a furious bloody light. He suddenly looked at the latter and the aura of his whole body exploded. Nie Fenghua was at his last gasp, thanks to Kuyo Onaguchi. How could Nie Tian remain calm? Humph! Kuyo Onaguchi sneered, and said directly, Nie Fenghua was hit by this Dean's palm. He's dead for sure. Do you want to avenge him? Too bad, you don't have the strength. Asshole! Nie Tian let out a roar, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was like a wild beast that had gone berserk, and his murderous intent was almost tangible. Humph! Kuyo Onaguchi laughed again, and then took a step forward and said in a cold tone, Anger is a good thing. It can stimulate one's potential to the greatest extent. In order to make you angry, I'll let your father die in front of you. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura was released from Kuyo Onaguchi's body, and it surged toward Nie Tian and his son. Boom! In an instant, Nie Tian felt a terrifying force pressing down on him, and he couldn't move at all. Kuyo Onaguchi was at the peak of the pseudo-sacred realm, and only Nie Tian, who was at the peak of the immortal state, could withstand his aura. Asshole! Nie Tian roared, and he desperately circulated his yuan meridians, releasing energy to protect Nie Fenghua. However, in the next moment, he felt an even more terrifying aura, which made him breathless, and his yuan meridians were suppressed. He was too weak, and there was no way he could compete with Kuyo Onaguchi. In an instant, Nie Tian and his son were in danger of death. The eyes of the crowd trembled, as if they could already see the scene of Nie Tian and his son being suppressed to death. Huairu's face was extremely gloomy, and his eyes were trembling violently. At this moment, he obviously wanted to save Nie Tian, but he was too weak to stop Kuyo Onaguchi. At this moment, a sharp voice sounded in the void. As the Dean of Saint's Soul, don't you feel ashamed to bully a junior in front of so many people? The voice was not loud, but it contained a terrifying aura, as if it was ringing in everyone's ears, and it was deafening. Everyone's eyes trembled, and they began to panic as they turned to look at the void. High up in the sky, in the void, dark clouds were rolling, and strong winds were blowing. An eerie and sharp sword intent appeared all of a sudden and pierced through the void, forming an icy, murderous aura that instantly enveloped the heavens and earth. The moment this aura appeared, everyone could not help but shudder. They could actually feel an incomparably real, murderous intent. Then a figure appeared, shrouded in an incomparably strong sword chi. He took one step at a time, as if every step he took would shatter the surrounding void. Chapter 2789. Chapter 2784. Chapter 2. 784. Eternally merciless Kuyo Onaguchi was taken aback by the sudden appearance of the figure in the sky. His eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. A name appeared in his mind: Cold Sword Merciless. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the figure. The figure was not burly, and his appearance was ordinary. He looked like an uncle who chopped firewood in the mountains. However, the sword intent around him was extremely terrifying. It surged as if it could tear everything apart. Just by standing there, he gave off the illusion that he was a sharp sword that had pierced through the void. Everyone's eyes trembled. They did not know how to express their astonishment. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that there was such a terrifying swordsman in the world. Who is this person? The sword intent around him is so strong. It's even scarier than Nie Fenghua's. I've never heard of such a terrifying swordsman in the Sacred Spirit Domain. Could he be the legend of the Sacred Spirit Domain, Cold Sword Merciless? The crowd was discussing. Some swordsmen guessed the identity of the newcomer, and their faces were filled with shock. The legend of the Sacred Spirit Domain, Cold Sword Merciless. In the entire Sacred Spirit Domain, there were a few top swordsmen, and Nie Fenghua was one of them. Above the top swordsmen, there was one person who was known as the legend of the Sacred Spirit Domain. This person was Cold Sword Merciless. Cold Sword Merciless was a legend of the Sacred Spirit Domain. This person had suddenly appeared. During the sword competition of the 3 sacred regions, he had defeated all the swordsmen in the world with a cold sword. Since then, there was a saying in the Sacred Spirit Domain: Cold Sword Merciless defeating all the swordsmen in the world with a single sword. However, Cold Sword Merciless had disappeared after that, like a blooming epiphyllum. Therefore, not many people in the entire Sacred Spirit domain knew about Cold Sword Merciless. At this moment, the sudden appearance of this swordsman reminded everyone of the legend of the Sacred Spirit domain, Cold Sword Merciless. Could he be Cold Sword Merciless? May I know who you are? Kuyo Anaguchi focused his gaze and calmed down. He released the pressure on Tion and looked at the figure. Although he had guessed that it was Cold Sword Merciless, he did not dare to confirm it. Furthermore, in his heart, he really did not wish for the person to be Lung Jian Wuqing. Holy soul, Dean Kuyo Anaguchi. It turns out to be a scum who only knows how to bully the younger generation. The newcomer seemed not to have heard Kuyo Anaguchi's words, faintly smiled, and loudly said. When his words fell into everyone's ears, everyone was stunned. In Saint Spirit Academy, publicly insulting the dean of Saint Spirit Academy as a scum, this was absolutely unprecedented in the millions of years of history of Saint Spirit Academy. Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes suddenly narrowed, and his face was so gloomy that it looked like it was about to drip blood. He asked again, "Who are you?" "Kuyo Anaguchi, you've already guessed who I am. Why are you still asking?" The person sneered and said provocatively, "Are you afraid? I don't want it to be me." "You." Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes trembled. Unable to conceal the horror in his heart, he asked in a trembling voice, "Are you really the Cold Sword Merciless?" "Umph." Suddenly, the person laughed weirdly, and then said, "Cold Sword Merciless was my previous name. Now, I am called Eternally Merciless." As the faint voice fell, Kuyo Anaguchi's face instantly stiffened. The name that he most wanted to hear had still appeared, and below, everyone was shocked, especially the swordsmen. In addition to shock and horror, there was also unconcealable worship in their eyes. "It's really the Cold Sword Merciless, my god. I actually saw the Cold Sword Merciless." The supreme existence of the sword world, the man known as the Legend, is really too powerful. The strongest swordsman in the 3 sacred regions. No doubt the number 1 person. The legend of the sword world, the Cold Sword Merciless, was the supreme idol in the hearts of countless swordsmen. Being able to see the Cold Sword Merciless made them feel emotional. It was as if they saw the majesty of the Cold Sword Merciless defeating all the swordsmen in the world with one sword. The discussion of the crowd made Kuyo Anaguchi's face even more unbearably gloomy. He had never thought that the legend of the sword world would actually suddenly appear, and even change his name to Eternally Merciless. Whether it was the Cold Sword Merciless or Eternally Merciless, in the eyes of Kuyo Anaguchi, they were the most troublesome existences. Eternally Merciless had disappeared for so long, but appeared on the day that Nie Fenghua returned to Saint Soul Academy. It was clearly not a coincidence. Without a doubt, Eternally Merciless came for Nie Fenghua, or rather, he came together with Nie Fenghua. This dean doesn't care whether you are the Cold Sword Merciless or Eternally Merciless. At this time, Kuyo Anaguchi Cold said, "This dean only wants to tell you, Saint Soul Academy doesn't welcome you." "Humph, is that so?" Eternally Merciless smiled indifferently, directly pointing at Nie Fenghua and saying, "I came for him. Since you don't welcome me, I'll take him away." And, hearing Eternally Merciless words, Kuyo Anaguchi's face suddenly darkened, directly taking a step forward, saying, "What if this dean doesn't let you take him away?" Nie Fenghua was already at his last gasp at this moment, about to die. Eternally Merciless wanted to save him with 2 indifferent words. How could it be so easy? "Kuyo Anaguchi, what I said just now wasn't to discuss with you." The corners of Eternally Merciless' mouth twitched, looking at Kuyo Anaguchi with cold contempt, saying, "If you want to stop me, first weigh your own strength." Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes narrowed, his face as gloomy as water. It seemed that Eternally Merciless didn't put him, the dean of the Saint Soul Academy, in his eyes at all. In the next moment, Kuyo Anaguchi let out a low roar. Then the aura around him surged. Since that's the case, This Dean will experience for himself how strong the cold sword Merciless, who once defeated all the swords in the world, is. Boom! Suddenly, heaven and earth shook, the wind and clouds howled, waves of golden power surged, surrounding Kuyo Onoguchi's body, incomparably terrifying. So strong. As expected of the Dean, the crowd below looked at Kuyo Onoguchi, their eyes trembling. At this moment, the aura displayed by Kuyo Onoguchi was even more terrifying than when the Holy Soul 3 elders used the Holy Soul secret technique. Is that all? However, when Eternally Merciless looked at Kuyo Onoguchi, he smiled indifferently. The expression on his face was incomparably disdainful, as if he didn't even have the courage to look at him. Arrogant. Kuyo Onoguchi was once again looked down upon. He was infuriated. Suddenly, he let out a roar. The aura around him surged, shaking heaven and earth. Boom! In the next moment, he slammed his palm down, and suddenly a giant golden palm appeared, rolling like a dragon. The aura was vigorous, and the destructive aura seemed to be able to destroy everything. It roared madly and attacked, eternally merciless. Facing Kuyo Onoguchi's tyrannical palm, Eternally Merciless was completely expressionless, like a boulder in the midst of a violent storm, not moving an inch. At the moment when the giant golden palm was about to land, he moved. With a shake of his body, the sword essence around him instantly exploded, and a boundless sword essence aura surged, enveloping the entire heaven and earth. At this moment, everyone's expression changed. They were shocked and dumbfounded. Everyone felt cold, a coldness that penetrated deep into their bones, as if it could directly freeze their yuan meridians. Chapter 2790. Chapter 2785. Chapter 2. 785. Betting his life. Everyone's expression froze the moment Eternally Merciless sword essence burst forth. At this moment, they personally experienced the terror of the sword world's legend. It was as though the entire world was shrouded by a merciless, murderous aura in an instant. That cold and indifferent feeling made everyone feel helpless and hopeless. Rumor had it that before Eternally Merciless cultivated the emotionless sword essence, he once had an unforgettable love. However, the person he loved left him in the end. The sudden turn of events caused him to fall into an inextricable pain. After going through years of painful enlightenment, he actually managed to cultivate the emotionless sword essence. The true meaning of the emotionless sword essence was actually to enter the Tao through emotions, but it was actually emotionless. As the saying went of all things in the world, the word emotions was the most lethal. Because one could reach the extreme of emotions, one could reach the extreme of Tao. The terrifying thing about Eternally Merciless was that the sword in his hand was an extremely emotionless sword. At the moment when Eternally Merciless completely released the sword essence, the emotionless aura in the sword essence permeated every corner of the world. At the next moment, an inconspicuous ancient black sword appeared in Eternally Merciless' hand. He waved his arm. Although it was an ordinary movement, it contained the coldest, murderous intent. At this moment, Eternally Merciless' eyes became as cold as the abyss. It was as though everything in the world, in his eyes, had become objects to be slaughtered by the emotionless sword. Swoosh! At the next moment, a sword shadow whizzed out. It was inconspicuous and looked like a weak sword mark. Crack, crack, crack. However, the sword shadow that looked like a sword mark split the void in its path. Bang! At the moment when the sword mark and sword shadow penetrated the giant golden palm, the seemingly indestructible giant palm collapsed. Immediately after, before anyone could react, Kuyo Onoguchi's body suddenly trembled. Poof! Immediately after, Kuyo Onoguchi's shoulder was torn apart, and a bloody hole appeared. Blood gushed out of it. Kuyo Onoguchi's eyes trembled as he retreated a few steps. He steadied himself as he looked at Eternally Merciless. His eyes trembled uncontrollably as he looked at Huang Xiaolong. Eternally Merciless, with a casual swing of his sword, had not only destroyed his full-powered palm strike, but it also directly pierced through his shoulder. Even a pseudo-sage 9th-stage expert wouldn't be able to instantly heal the shoulder that was pierced by the emotionless sword intent. At this moment, the crowd below was completely shocked by the scene in the sky. Countless people opened their mouths wide, but no sound came out. Originally, everyone thought that Kuyo Onaguchi was in existence on the same level as eternally merciless. Even if he wasn't as good as the latter, there should be a slight gap between them. However, the result that everyone saw now was that there was a huge gap between Kuyo Onaguchi and eternally merciless. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Kuyo Onaguchi and eternally merciless were on two different levels. With just a swing of his sword, eternally merciless had completely crushed Kuyo Onaguchi. The legend of the sword world, who had defeated all the swords in the world with a single swing of his sword, was indeed worthy of his reputation. In the sky, Kuyo Onaguchi steadied his body and asked with a gloomy expression, "Why? What do you want to ask?" Eternally merciless smiled calmly. "Why didn't you kill me?" Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes were trembling, and his expression was extremely unpleasant. If the swing of his sword had been slightly off, it would have definitely pierced through Kuyo Onaguchi's heart. It was obvious that eternally merciless only wanted to injure Kuyo Onaguchi, not kill him. "My sword is heartless, but it's not immoral." Eternally merciless smiled again and said, "There is no grudge between you and me. I'm only here to take Nie Fenghua away. Since you've stopped me, I only need to let you know that you can't stop me. That's enough." "Is that all?" Kuyo Onaguchi's gaze was gloomy, as if he was thinking about something. "Of course, there's another reason." Eternally merciless lips twitched. He suddenly looked at Nie Fenghua and said, "Your life belongs to Nie Fenghua. You are the devil in his heart. If I kill you, he will definitely kill you. If I kill you, then Nie Fenghua will have to live with his inner demon for the rest of his life." "I understand." Kuyo Onaguchi's gaze slightly sank. He seemed to hesitate for a while, then said, "I want to know, what's the relationship between you and Nie Fenghua? Why did you save him? What do you think?" Eternally merciless smiled faintly and asked back, "He worshipped you as his master?" Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes trembled as he asked. Nie Fenghua had only left Holy Soul Academy for a few decades, but in these few decades his strength had advanced very quickly. If it was said that he didn't have a strong person guiding him, Kuyo Onaguchi absolutely wouldn't believe it. Eternally merciless appearance made Kuyo Onaguchi firmly believe that the former was guiding Nie Fenghua. "We're just friends, a cooperative relationship. I help him, and he helps me. It's that simple." Eternally merciless smiled faintly, very indifferently. "That's it." Kuyo Onaguchi frowned, then asked, "The Holy Soul curse mark in Nie Fenghua's body. It was you who helped him suppress it." "That's right." Eternally merciless nodded his head and said, "I have to admit, the Holy Soul curse mark is indeed terrifying. Even my emotionless sword essence can only suppress it. Perhaps one day, when Nie Fenghua's Holy Soul curse mark becomes even stronger, the emotionless sword essence will not be able to suppress it." Kuyo Onaguchi's face was gloomy, and he didn't speak for a while. After a long time, he said, "Eternally merciless, Kuyo Onaguchi wholeheartedly accepts being defeated by you." "That's good." Eternally merciless smiled faintly. Then his figure moved and directly came to the side of Nie Tian and Nie Fenghua, preparing to leave. Nie Tian looked at Eternally Merciless. His eyes were gloomy, and he didn't speak a word. "Nie Fenghua won't die. Don't worry." Eternally Merciless looked at Nie Tian and said with a faint smile, "Thank you, Senior." Nie Tian bowed slightly and handed Nie Fenghua to Eternally Merciless. Of course, he saw the scene that had just happened. Eternally Merciless was too terrifying. He was the strongest swordsman he had ever seen. Even the sword saint Ling Yun, selfless sword demon, and the others that he had met in the frozen ruins were far inferior to Eternally Merciless. Nie Tian didn't expect that there was such a terrifying person hiding in the Holy Soul region. "Kid, come with me." Eternally Merciless smiled faintly, said to Nie Tian, and prepared to leave. Everyone looked at Eternally Merciless, and their eyes couldn't help but tremble. They were all puzzled. Did Eternally Merciless just take Nie Fenghua away like this? But at this moment, Kuyo Onaguchi couldn't do anything, because he was completely not Eternally Merciless' opponent. Wait, but at this moment, Kuyo Onaguchi's voice sounded again. Eternally Merciless figure stopped, and he coldly said, "Do you still want to stop me? Nie Fenghua is a traitor of the Holy Soul Academy. I'm not willing to let you take her away like this." Kuyo Onaguchi said in a deep voice, his eyes surging with a malicious light. "Not willing." Eternally Merciless sneered and said, "What do you want?" "I want to bet once." Kuyo Onaguchi said coldly. "Bet on what?" Eternally Merciless frowned and asked. Chapter 2791. A Desperate Gamble. Gamble with his life? Kuyo Onaguchi's voice fell, making Eternally Merciless frown, his expression a lot gloomy. Yes, gamble with his life. Kuyo Onaguchi nodded heavily, his gaze sinisterly looking at Nietan, saying, "A son must pay his father's debts. If you want to take Nie Fenghua away, Nietan must win this bet." Eternally Merciless gaze focused. Then he couldn't help but sneer, saying, "Kuyo Onaguchi, if I want to leave now, you simply can't stop me. Why should I gamble with you?" The present situation was completely under Eternally Merciless control. As long as he wanted to leave, Kuyo Onaguchi simply couldn't stop him. Humph! Suddenly, Kuyo Onaguchi sneered, saying, "Eternally Merciless, if you want to leave, this dean indeed can't stop you. But if you want to take this father and son away, it won't be an easy matter either. You don't really think that my Saint Soul Academy is a place where people can casually enter and leave, do you? I can tell you, the Saint Soul Mountain Range is enveloped by a huge ancient killing formation. As long as I activate it, the entire Saint Soul Mountain Range will be destroyed in an instant. Even if you're Eternally Merciless, don't even think of breaking the ancient killing formation." Finished speaking, Kuyo Onaguchi's expression became even more gloomy and vicious. Eternally Merciless couldn't help but have a gloomy expression after listening to Kuyo Onaguchi, saying in a cold voice, "In order to keep me here, you'll destroy the entire Saint Soul Mountain Range? So what?" Kuyo Onaguchi smiled coldly, saying in a cold voice, "Since you want to take away the traitor of Saint Soul Academy, that's provoking Saint Soul Academy. As the dean, how can I just watch as you take him away? Even if everyone here has to die with you, you won't hesitate?" Eternal Merciless said in a deep voice, his expression cold. "Yes." Kuyo Onaguchi nodded heavily. With a resolute expression, he loudly said, "For the dignity of Saint Soul Academy, all of us Saint Soul Academy can be sacrificed at any time." As Ling Rant's voice rang out, the faces of the people below turned pale. Kuyo Onaguchi did not hesitate to destroy the Holy Soul Mountain Range in order to keep Merciless Eternally Merciless. This was something that no one had expected. Moreover, Kuyo Onaguchi's posture didn't seem to be fake. Eternally Merciless' expression immediately became gloomy, not knowing what to do for a moment. "Kuyo Onaguchi, what do you want to bet?" "I'll bet with you." At this time, Nietan took a step forward, speaking coldly, eyes as firm as killing intent. Eternally Merciless stared blankly for a moment, his expression even more gloomy. To think that he, a grand legend of the sword world, at this moment actually wanted Nietan to step forward. "Fine." Kuyo Onaguchi's gaze blazed as he looked at Nietan. He was waiting for Nietan to take the initiative to step forward. He sneered, saying, "Nietan, this dean will give you a chance. As long as you win, Nie Fenghua can live. If you lose, Nie Fenghua must die. Don't talk nonsense, speak directly. What do you want me to do?" Nie Tianling said coldly, eyes fierce and firm. "For the following bet, no matter what, he must win. You have guts." Kuyo Onaguchi sneered, then waved his hand. A strange flame appeared, burning in the void, instantly condensing into a huge furnace. Nietan's eyes narrowed when he saw the huge furnace. He could feel the unusually strong Saint's spirit chi. Nietian, the furnace you see is called the Saint's Soul Furnace. It is filled with the Saint's spirit flame. Kuyo Anaguchi smiled coldly and said, "Our bet is very simple. As long as you enter the Saint's Soul Furnace and stay inside for more than an hour, you win. Otherwise, you lose." Nietian frowned, and his expression became very unsightly. Kuyo Anaguchi was too cunning. The Saint's spirit flame burning inside the Saint's Soul Furnace had a strong burning effect on the martial body of a cultivator. What was more troublesome was that Nietian felt that the Saint's spirit flame had a great stimulating effect on the Saint's soul curse seal in his body. At this moment, standing outside the Saint's Soul Furnace, he could already feel the Saint's soul curse seal in his body becoming active, as if it would soon go berserk. If he entered the Saint's Soul Furnace, even if he could resist the burning of the Saint's spirit flame, he would not be able to resist the Saint's soul curse seal in his body. Kuyo Anaguchi proposed such a bet. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Nietian. "Nietian, do you agree to this bet?" Kuyo Anaguchi saw that Nietian did not speak, so he smiled coldly, his face full of provocation. "Nietian, don't agree." Before Nietian could speak, Fat Cat's voice came from his divine sense, shouting nervously, "The Saint's soul curse seal will go out of control. You will die." The last time the Saint's soul curse seal went out of control, Nietian almost died. Fortunately, Si Xiaoya was there and used the heavenly Tao scar to stabilize him. This time, if he entered the Saint's Soul Furnace, Nietian would definitely go out of control again. "Nietian, this furnace is very strange. You must not enter." At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice also sounded, saying in a deep voice. Nietian's eyes were gloomy, and he did not say a word. "Kuyo Anaguchi, you are the dignified dean of the Saint's Soul sect. Do you not feel ashamed at all to make things difficult for a junior?" At this time, Eternally Merciless could not help but say coldly, "I will take Nie Fenghua away now. I want to see if you have the courage to fight to the death." With that, Eternally Merciless figure moved, and he actually wanted to leave. "I agree." But this time, Nietian suddenly opened his mouth, looking coldly at Kuyo Anaguchi, and said loudly. Kuyo Anaguchi was stunned at first, then his eyes trembled, and he was pleasantly surprised and passionate. He knew that Nietian would definitely agree. At this time, Nietian had no choice but to risk his life. He would definitely persist in the Saint Soul Furnace for an hour, even if he died inside. He could only win this bet. He could not lose. "Nietian, please." Kuyo Anaguchi smiled coldly, indicating that Nietian could start. Nietian's eyes trembled slightly, and he turned to look at the unconscious Nie Fenghua. Then, without hesitation, he jumped into the Saint Soul Furnace. Eternally Merciless frowned, and his expression was very ugly. Looking at Kuyo Anaguchi, his face was sinister, and his heart coldly said, "Nietian, the moment you stepped into the Saint's Soul Furnace, it was already destined that only one of you can live. The Saint's Soul Flame will incessantly stimulate the Saint's Soul Incantation, and with your martial body, you can't even withstand the second-rank Saint's Soul Incantation." Thinking of this, Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes shone with a sinister and vicious light. He calculated the time, and within an hour, the power of the Saint's Soul Flame was enough to stimulate the Saint's Soul Incantation to the third rank. And Nietian's martial body couldn't even withstand the second-rank Saint's Soul Incantation. If Nietian wanted to save Nie Fenghua, then he would have to use his life to save her. At the same time, in the Saint Soul Furnace, as soon as Nietian entered, he felt waves of blazing Saint Soul Flame burning fiercely and began to incinerate his body. And in his body, stimulated by the Saint Soul Flame, the Saint Soul Incantation runes began to go berserk, wreaking havoc in a frenzy. In an instant, Nietian felt as if the meridians in his body were being bitten by thousands of ants and insects, and a pain that penetrated deep into his bones assaulted his entire body. Chapter 2792. A Blessing in Disguise. Within the Saint Spirit Furnace, Nyetian was enveloped by the violent and blazing Saint Spirit flames. Even if he activated his astral soul shield to defend himself, he was still unable to block the Saint Spirit flame's aura from entering his body. As the Saint Spirit flame continued to enter his body, the Saint Spirit curse mark hidden in his martial body started to go berserk. Countless runes wreaked havoc, as if they were trying to tear Nyetian's body apart. Nyetian endured the intense pain. He felt as if his body was being bitten by thousands of ants and insects, and outside his body, there were countless sharp blades cutting and tearing. The piercing pain caused his entire face to contort, making him look ferocious and terrifying. Nyetian. At this moment, the fat cat's panicked voice rang out. He could feel that all of Nyetian's meridians, blood, and bones were under tremendous pressure. The power of the Holy Soul Curse Seal was too terrifying. Right now, Nyetian's martial body could only withstand the power of the first level of the Holy Soul Curse Seal. But at this moment, the Holy Soul Seal was becoming more and more violent under the stimulation of the Holy Soul Flames. In an hour's time, the Saint Soul Curse was enough to reach the third or even the fourth rank. This was something that Nyetian's martial body could not withstand. At that time, Nyetian's martial body would be forcefully torn apart by the Sacred Soul Curse Seal. At this moment, Nyetian's whole body was drenched in cold sweat, and even his divine sense was slowly collapsing. How could he have the time to pay attention to the fat cat? Fat cat, if this goes on, this kid won't be able to hold on. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded. I know, Fat cat growled. He was very clear about the state of Nyetian's martial body. However, he had no choice but to watch helplessly. At this moment, Nyetian couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a beast-like howl. Outside the sacred soul furnace, everyone could clearly hear Nyetian's blood-curdling screams. It was as if they could feel how much pain Nyetian was enduring just by listening to his screams. Eternally Merciless narrowed his eyes and his face darkened. He thought to himself, Brat, you have to hold on. He was confused because he felt that the aura of the Saint Spirit Flame was not strong. It should be difficult for it to destroy a peak immortal state martial artist. Although he did not know much about Nyetian, he could feel that Nyetian's martial body was far stronger than other warriors of the same level. He should be able to withstand the Saint Spirit Flame. But why were Nyetian's cries so tragic at this moment? Could it be that there's also a Holy Soul Curse Seal in that boy's body? In the next moment, Eternally Merciless suddenly thought of something. He looked at Kuyo Onaguchi, and he couldn't help but cry out in his heart when he saw the latter's extremely strange smile. Eternally Merciless was no stranger to the Holy Soul Curse, because Nyefenghua's Holy Soul Curse was suppressed by him using the emotionless sword intent. Otherwise, Nyefenghua would not have survived until now and would have been tortured to death by the Holy Soul Curse Seal. He sensed the Saint Spirit Flame and realized that the aura of the flame was extremely similar to the Holy Soul Curse Seal. If Nyetian also had the Holy Soul Curse Seal in his body, it would be terrible. At this moment, Kuyo Onaguchi smiled coldly and looked at Eternally Merciless with disdain. Eternally Merciless, you will definitely lose this round. Despicable. Eternally Merciless' eyes trembled as he growled. He was now sure that Nyetian definitely had the Holy Soul Curse Seal in his body. If he had known this earlier, he would never have let Nyetian enter the Holy Soul Furnace. But now that Nyetian was already in the Holy Soul Furnace, it was too late to say anything. He never thought that Kuyo Onaguchi would be so shameless. The crowd below also heard Nyetian's screams. Their eyes trembled as they started discussing. Listening to this kid's screams, he can't hold on any longer. He won't die in the furnace, right? So what if he can't hold on? Could it be that he can still jump out of the furnace? If he comes out now, his traitor father will die. Sigh. Speaking of which, this kid is really pitiful. If he holds on, he will definitely die in the Holy Soul Furnace. If he doesn't, his father will die. Between his life and his father's life, there can only be one. Ardeen is really ruthless. In my opinion, this kid deserves it. who asked him to have a traitor father. As they spoke, their gazes shifted to the holy soul furnace. Their eyes shone with a fervent light. It was as if they were watching a good show. And at this moment, the person with the ugliest expression was Hua Iru. He stared at the holy soul furnace, his old face stiff and lifeless, clearly thinking about something in his heart. If he had known that Nie Fenghua would appear in this way, he would definitely not have allowed Nie Tian to come to the Holy Soul Academy. Is the future star sky Holy Lord going to die like this? Hua Iru's eyes trembled slightly as he thought to himself. He was extremely looking forward to a miracle. At the same time, in the Holy Soul Furnace, Nie Tian's body was burning with a Holy Soul flame, and the Holy Soul seal in his body became even more violent. The pain he was suffering at this moment was absolutely unimaginable to ordinary people. If it had been someone with a weak mind, his divine sense would have already collapsed before his martial body was torn apart. Nie Tian, hang in there, I will be done soon. At this moment, Liolio's voice was suddenly heard. It was difficult to hide the nervousness in his voice, but at the same time, there was a trace of excitement. Nie Tian's divine sense was still awake at this moment. Although he did not know what Lulu was talking about, he nodded his head heavily. Then, a white halo began to emit from Nie Tian's forehead, instantly enveloping his entire body. Then a strange scene happened. The violent holy soul flame hit Nie Tian's body and was actually absorbed by the white halo outside his body. At this moment, Nie Tian could no longer feel the aura of the holy soul flame. The faint layer of white halo had completely blocked the holy soul flame. Nie Tian took a deep breath, and his ferocious face eased a lot. The cold sweat on his face slowly receded. After a while, the holy soul seal in his body slowly stabilized and returned to its dormant state. Lulu, are you absorbing the power of the holy soul flame? At this moment, Nie Tian became cold and asked with a slight frown. He did not expect Lulu to be able to absorb even the holy soul flame. Of course, Lulu laughed excitedly and said, "The holy soul flame is good stuff. I am currently weak, and this holy soul flame is just right for me to recover to a full state." Actually, when Nie Tian had just entered the holy soul furnace, Lulu had already started to prepare everything. He just did not say it out loud. Earlier, he had used all of his power to help Nie Tian make his breakthrough. Now, he could absorb the power of the holy soul flame to recover himself. Nie Tian was taken aback, and his mind went blank. It seemed that entering the holy soul furnace was a blessing in disguise. Of course, he knew that the power that Lulu absorbed would still be given to him in the end. The holy soul flame is good stuff, but what really excites me is this holy soul furnace. At this moment, Liolio's voice was heard again, and it was filled with greed. Holy soul furnace? Nie Tian was stunned, and he could not help but frown. Chapter 2793. Complete Absorption. Nie Tian, who was in the Saint Soul furnace, was speechless after hearing Liolio's words. He had not expected that Lulu would absorb the sacred soul furnace as well. Judging from the expression on Kuyo Onaguchi's face when he took out the sacred soul furnace, it seemed to be very important to him. He wondered what expression Kuyo Onaguchi would have if Lulu really absorbed the sacred soul furnace. It would definitely be a beautiful scene. "Lulu, do you need me to do anything now?" Nie Tian asked with a faint smile after calming down. "Nothing. You just need to sit here quietly," Lulu replied with a smile. His tone was filled with excitement and pride. At the same time, outside the sacred soul furnace, Cursed Gigu couldn't help but feel strange when he saw the sacred soul furnace become quiet. His eyes narrowed. However, the sacred soul furnace isolated all senses from the outside world, so even he couldn't sense what was happening inside. Kuyo Onaguchi was confused by Nie Tian's sudden silence. That kid can't be dead, right? On the other side, eternally merciless expression was even more awkward. He was worried that Nie Tian had died inside the sacred soul furnace. The crowd below trembled as they discussed among themselves. There's no movement from that kid. He should be dead. He was screaming so miserably just now. Now that he's not screaming, he must be dead. What do you guys think? If that kid died inside the sacred soul furnace, did he survive for an hour? Probably. After all, he stayed in the sacred soul furnace for an hour. Ha ha ha. Everyone discussed with a gloating look on their faces. Kuyo Anaguchi, hurry up and put away the saint's soul furnace. I want to see Nietion's current situation. Eternally Merciless couldn't help but take a step forward and say in a deep voice, Eternally Merciless, this dean and Nietion agreed on an hour's time. Now that the time isn't up, this dean naturally can't collect the smelting furnace. Kuyo Anaguchi smiled faintly and replied coldly, You. Eternally Merciless' face was gloomy, and he was momentarily speechless. He thought that if he removed the sacred soul furnace now, perhaps Nietion would still be alive and could be saved. The more time passed, the more danger Nietion was in. If Nietion really died, then even if Nie Fenghua survived, she would inevitably carry a lifetime of guilt. For a father, his own son had died to save him. This would be a lifelong burden. At the moment, Nie Fenghua was unconscious. Eternally Merciless had to make a choice for him. If between Nietion and Nie Fenghua, only one person could survive, it had to be Nietion. However, Kuyo Anaguchi wasn't willing to remove the sacred soul furnace. He clearly wanted to kill Nietion. Senior Wuching, I'm fine. However, at this moment, Nietion's voice suddenly rang out from the sacred soul furnace. His voice wasn't loud, but it was like a clap of thunder. Everyone was stunned as they stared at the sacred soul furnace in shock. Nietion was in the sacred soul furnace, so the outside world couldn't sense his situation. However, he could see what was happening outside. In order not to worry Eternally Merciless, he had said it casually. However, everyone was stunned by his voice. They were completely stunned. Judging from Nietion's voice, he seemed to be completely fine. He was very calm and indifferent. It could even be said that he was very satisfied. How is this possible? After a few seconds, Kuyo Anaguchi reacted and let out a strange cry. His face was as ugly as it could be. He had never imagined that Nietion was actually still alive. Furthermore, he was very normal, as if nothing had happened to him. Eternally Merciless was also stunned and couldn't react for a long time. He even suspected that Nietion's miserable cries just now were all an act. The expressions of the crowd below were even more shocked. Their jaws dropped to the ground, and it took a long time for them to make a sound. Did I hear wrongly? Why is that kid's voice so calm? It seems like nothing has happened to him. He was screaming so miserably just now. Why is he suddenly fine? He can't be pretending, right? That sacred soul furnace is too strange. The outside world can't sense what's inside and can only hear sounds. Could that kid be playing with us? The crowd couldn't figure out the situation inside the sacred soul furnace, so they could only make wild guesses. Most of them didn't want Nietion to win the bet, because if he did, there wouldn't be a good show to watch. Meanwhile, inside the sacred soul furnace, Lulu was crazily absorbing the sacred soul flames. The white halo around Nietion's body was getting brighter. After a while, the aura of the sacred soul flames inside the furnace started to weaken. At this time, Lulu started to absorb the energy of the sacred soul furnace. Outside the sacred soul furnace, Kuyo Anaguchi felt that something was amiss. His expression sank as he took a step forward and tried to recall the sacred soul furnace. However, he could feel that the sacred soul furnace was being restrained by a force, and he couldn't recall it. Damn it! The sudden change caused Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes to tremble. He roared, Nietion, what are you trying to do? Kuyo Anaguchi, you'll know what I'm trying to do soon. Nietion's voice was heard, replying in a mocking tone. Bastard! Kuyo Anaguchi had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. His expression was extremely gloomy, and he didn't know what to do. Eternally Merciless was just beside him, so he didn't dare to destroy the sacred soul furnace. This kid called Nietion has some tricks up his sleeve. Eternally Merciless smiled and murmured. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the sacred soul furnace became smaller and smaller, gradually disappearing. How is this possible? He's actually absorbing the energy of the sacred soul furnace. Kuyo Anaguchi finally understood. His eyes trembled violently, and he couldn't believe what was happening in front of him. Not even in his wildest dreams did he imagine that Nye Tian could absorb the sacred soul furnace. What was on Nye Tian's body? Kuyo Anaguchi didn't know what was happening in front of him at all. The shock in his heart was indescribable. The worst thing was that he couldn't stop Nye Tian at all. He could only watch as Nye Tian absorbed the sacred soul furnace. As for the crowd below, they were all petrified, like rows of wooden sculptures. After a while, the sacred soul furnace disappeared completely in front of everyone's eyes. Nye Tian's figure appeared, covered in a layer of white light. In an instant, it flickered and disappeared between his brows. Everyone looked at Nye Tian's figure, and the shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. They all gasped and froze on the spot. The scene in front of them was too strange. Nye Tian had actually absorbed the sacred soul furnace. At this moment, Nye Tian looked at Kuyo Anaguchi, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He said calmly, "Kuyo Anaguchi, you've lost." Chapter 2794. Chapter 2789. Chapter 2. 789. I will pay you back. Kuyo Anaguchi's expression was one of shock and fear. He had never expected that Nye Tian would have a Saint Spirit blood seal in his body. The Saint Spirit blood seal was very well hidden. Kuyo Anaguchi only confirmed that it was the Saint Spirit blood seal at the last moment when he saw the white halo around Nye Tian's body. Why can't I have the Saint Spirit blood seal in my body? Nye Tian smiled faintly. Since Kuyo Anaguchi had seen through the Saint Spirit blood seal, there was no need for him to hide it. Kuyo Anaguchi looked at Nye Tian and felt suffocated. There was a lump of air in his throat that he could neither swallow nor spit out. It was extremely uncomfortable. He had never expected that Nye Tian would have the Saint Spirit blood seal in his body. If he had known about the existence of the Saint Spirit blood seal, he would never have allowed Nye Tian to enter the Saint Soul Furnace. He had paid a huge price to refine the Saint Soul Furnace. Now, the furnace had been absorbed by Nye Tian just like that. How could he not be angry? I won the bet. Nye Tianling looked coldly at Kuyo Anaguchi and said faintly. Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes trembled viciously. He could not say a word at this moment. Below, the crowd was in an uproar. That kid absorbed the Saint Soul Furnace. He really won. Not only did the dean lose, he even lost the Saint Soul Furnace for nothing. This is unbelievable. Is this silver-haired kid more talented than his traitor father? I wonder if the dean will let them go. Voices expressed the shock and astonishment in their hearts. At this moment, Nye Tian's expression was very calm. He did not say much, but turned to look at Eternally Merciless and said, "Senior Merciless, let's go." Yes. The stiffness on Eternally Merciless' face eased a little. He looked at Nye Tian with a hint of passion in his eyes. He nodded and prepared to leave. Wait. At this moment, Kuyo Anaguchi's voice sounded. Eternally Merciless frowned and stared coldly at Kuyo Anaguchi. Kuyo Anaguchi, Nye Tian has already won. Are you going back on your word? Nye Tian had won the bet. If Kuyo Anaguchi went back on his word, it would be too shameless. In any case, he was still the dean of Holy Soul Academy. Returning in front of countless teachers and students of Holy Soul Academy was really shameless. This dean admits that Nye Tian has indeed won. Kuyo Anaguchi said coldly. His eyes were cold as he said, "This dean can let you take Nye Fenghua away, but Nye Tian cannot leave. He is still a student of the academy. Without this dean's permission, he cannot leave the academy. Kuyo Anaguchi, you are too despicable to do this." Eternally Merciless' eyes trembled. He did not expect Kuyo Anaguchi to be so shameless. Even he could not help but have killing intent at this moment. Whether it is despicable or not, is this dean's business. Kuyo Anaguchi smiled coldly. Moreover, what this dean said is the truth. Eternally merciless, eyes darkened. His whole body suddenly surged with endless sword intent. Suddenly, heaven and earth became incomparably austere. With his strength, killing Kuyo Onaguchi was as easy as turning his hand. Senior Wuching. But at this time, Nietion took a step forward and said, Kuyo Onaguchi is right. I'm still a student of Saint Soul Academy. If I leave the academy now, wouldn't I be like my father, carrying the name of a traitor of the academy? This, eternally merciless, was stunned. He was speechless for a moment. Although Nietion's words sounded a little strange, if one thought about it carefully, it was indeed so. Umph. Kuyo Onaguchi laughed coldly. His sinister eyes stared at Nietion. Nietion, if you leave now, this dean will carve your name on the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. You will be like your father, a sinner of Saint Soul Academy. Dean, there's no need to go through so much trouble. I will not leave the academy. Nie Tianling laughed coldly. My father wants to erase his name from the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. If he can't do it, as a son, I will do it for him. Don't worry. Before my father's name is erased from the Saint Soul Sin Tablet, I will definitely not leave the academy. When Kuyo Onaguchi heard Nie Tion's words, his eyes trembled. The corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. He laughed coldly in his heart. Nie Tion, you really are Nie Fenghua's son. Just like your father, you value your reputation. You father and son are burdened by your reputation. This will become your greatest weakness. Nie Tion smiled faintly. His expression was calm and indifferent. His decision to stay at Saint Soul Academy was not because he was afraid of being a traitor. It was because he wanted to complete Nie Fenghua's unfinished business. Furthermore, he had other plans in his heart. Since Kuyo Onaguchi had planted the Saint Soul Curse mark in his body, it meant that he was useful to the former. Therefore, the former would not easily kill him. After considering all aspects, Nie Tion made his decision to continue staying at Saint Soul Academy. Nie Tion, have you decided? Eternally merciless saw the determination in Nie Tion's eyes. He couldn't help but frown and ask, I've decided. Nie Tion nodded his head. His figure moved and solemnly came to eternally merciless side. He bowed deeply and said, Senior Wuching, I'll have to trouble you to take care of my father. Eternally merciless frowned. He couldn't help but look at the unconscious Nie Fenghua. He smiled bitterly and said, Nie Fenghua owes me a lot. I helped him, but it seems that he won't have the chance to help me. When Nie Tion heard eternally merciless words, he couldn't help but frown. He could see that there seemed to be some agreement between eternally merciless and Nie Fenghua. This was why eternally merciless wanted to save Nie Fenghua. But unfortunately, Nie Fenghua was defeated by Kuyo Onaguchi. Therefore, it would be very difficult for him to repay eternally merciless favor. Senior Wuching, no matter what my father owes you, I'll repay it for him. Nie Tion said gravely after thinking for a while. Eternally merciless looked at Nie Tion. Feeling the latter's determination, he smiled faintly and sighed, saying, Nie Tion, you really are a genius. But it's a pity that your strength is too weak. What I want to do, even your father will have to pay a huge price to complete it. The current you can't help me at all. Nie Tion's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he said solemnly again, Senior Wuching, what my father owes you, I'll repay it. Eternally merciless looked at Nie Tion. His expression changed slightly, and his heart actually trembled inexplicably. At this moment, Nie Tion reminded him of a person, himself in the past. The unswerving determination in Nie Tion's eyes moved him. He believed that there was nothing that a person with such eyes could not do. Good. Immediately, eternally merciless laughed brightly and said, I'll remember your words and wait for you to grow up. Thank you, Senior. Nie Tion nodded slightly, his face calm. Eternally merciless was very strong. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was the strongest person he had ever seen, but he was confident that one day he would definitely surpass eternally merciless. Chapter 2795. The son of a traitor, Nie Tion. I'm leaving. Eternally Merciless looked at Nyetan and prepared to leave. Nyetian nodded slightly, his eyes fixed on the unconscious Nye Fenghua. Father and son only met for a very short period of time. To be exact, it was only the time of a glance. And now, father and son were about to separate. Nyetian had too much reluctance in his heart, but he had no choice but to do so. At the end of the day, his strength was still too weak, and he was restrained at every turn. If he was an expert that stood at the peak of the myriad domains, how would Kuyo Onaguchi dare to find trouble with him? Father, believe me, I will definitely grow up very quickly. Nyetian looked at Nye Fenghua, his eyes trembling slightly as he said heavily in his heart, Nyetian, don't worry, I will take care of your father. Eternally Merciless smiled faintly. I will remember what you said just now, and I will take it seriously. I hope you won't let me down. And thank you for your trust, Elder. Nyetian nodded heavily, and once again bowed to Eternally Merciless to thank him. With Eternally Merciless strength and identity, he could completely treat Nyetian's words as a joke. But he took it seriously. This meant that he regarded Nyetian as a friend and treated him seriously. Eternal Wuching nodded slightly and didn't say anything further. His figure flashed, and he strode through the sky at extremely swift speed. He transformed into a sword mark that flashed towards an expanse of space, and he vanished completely in an instant. Nyetian looked at the sword mark in the void, his expression somewhat solemn. After a long time, it slightly improved. After a moment, he calmed down, and a pair of deep eyes looked at Kuyo Onaguchi. The corner of Kuyo Onaguchi's mouth trembled. With a smile that wasn't a smile, he said, Nyetian, you can stay at Holy Spirit Academy. This dean is very happy. I hope you won't be like your father, a traitor to Holy Spirit Academy. Dean, you don't have to provoke me. Nyetianling laughed and replied, I won't leave the academy before I help my father fulfill his wish. That's good. Kuyo Onaguchi laughed coldly. He didn't stay any longer as his silhouette flickered and he left. He had first been injured by Nye Fenghua, and then he had been struck by Eternally Merciless sword. His injuries were not light, and if he wanted to completely recover, he would need some time. More importantly, his sacred soul furnace had been absorbed by Nyetian. This was what hurt him the most. Kuyo Onaguchi. Nyetian looked in the direction in which Kuyo Onaguchi left. The corner of his mouth twitched coldly, and he said in his heart, You owe my father. I will definitely help him get it back. After a moment, he didn't stay any longer, and his silhouette flickered in a flash, heading in the direction of Icefire Valley. The crowd below took a long time to disperse. Today's big play was really too unforgettable. Nye Fenghua's breathtaking performance was shocking. If he hadn't fought with the three elders of the Holy Spirit Academy before, but had had a fair fight with Kuyo Onaguchi, who knew what the result would have been. Eternally Merciless appearance was even more shocking. The legend of the sword world that defeated all the swords in the world with one sword was really shocking. But the most surprising thing was still Nyetian's sudden appearance. After today, everyone in Holy Spirit Academy would know that Nyetian was the son of the traitor Nye Fenghua. Nyetian's silhouette descended and appeared outside Icefire Valley. Nyetian, are you all right? Huairu stepped forward and asked nervously. I'm fine. Nyetian smiled faintly, and his aura didn't weaken at all, but instead became a little stronger. At this moment, the brothers Jason and Jason looked at Nyetian with a somewhat unnatural expression, as if they wanted to say something, but didn't dare to. Jason. Nyetian looked at the brothers Jason and knew what they were thinking and said directly, I'm Nye Fenghua's son. If you don't want to accept a traitor's son as your boss, you could go back on your words at any time. I don't blame you. Boss, Jason and Jason were stunned and didn't know what to say for a moment. They were indeed very shocked and conflicted when they learned that Nyetian was Nye Fenghua's son. Everyone in Holy Spirit Academy knew that Nye Fenghua was the biggest traitor of the academy. Therefore, there was no doubt that Nyetian would become the target of the academy. Under such circumstances, if they continued to be Nyetian's lackeys, they would also attract endless trouble. You can leave, Nyetian said coldly, seeing that the two were hesitating. Jason and Jason looked at each other awkwardly. Do we need to look at the other party's background when making friends? At this moment, Hua Iru said in a deep voice, if that's the case, are you making friends with this person or his background? Jason and Jushan's expressions changed, and they were even more embarrassed. Jason, I won't blame you if you leave now, but from now on, we are no longer friends but passers-by, Nyetian said in a deep voice. Just as Nyetian's words left his mouth, a deep, furious bellow echoed out. Bastard! Then a figure landed, and it was none other than Sidhu Bai. Grandmaster! Jason and Jason were stunned when they saw Sidhu Bai, but they immediately reacted and exclaimed in shock. Jason and Jason, what are you thinking? Sidhu Bai's face darkened, and he scolded, just because Nyetian's father is Nye Fenghua, you're going to disown him? What's the difference between your actions and being ungrateful? Jason and Jushan's faces darkened, and they knelt down in fear. They did not know why Sidhu Bai was so angry. Senior Sidhu, I won't blame them no matter what choice they make. Nyetian looked at Sidhu Bai and said calmly. Jason and Jason immediately reacted, and they looked at Nyetian and said in unison, Boss Nyetian, we were wrong. No matter what happens in the future, you will always be our boss. Nyetian's eyes flickered, and he stepped forward to help the Shanha and Jason brothers up. He looked at them without saying a word. Jason and Jason, you guys leave first. After a while, Sidhu Bai let the Shanha and Jason brothers leave first, and the two left after informing Nyetian. Only Sidhu Bai, Hua Iru, and Nyetian were left outside the Icefire Valley. Nyetian, I did not expect you to be Nye Fenghua's son. Sidhu Bai spoke in a deep voice, and he looked at Nyetian with a complicated gaze, as if he was feeling guilty. At this moment, Hua Iru told him about the battle between Nye Fenghua and the three elders of the Holy Soul sect. Nyetian stepped forward, bowed slightly, and said, Senior Sidhu, it was my father who acted rashly. I apologize on his behalf. Nyetian, you don't have to apologize. It's our fault. Sidhu Bai smiled bitterly and said, I did not expect Kuyo Onaguchi to be so despicable as to use us three elders. The Holy Soul Sin Tablet is of utmost importance to the Holy Soul Academy. We have to protect it. Sigh. At this point, Sidhu Bai could not help but sigh and said, if Nye Fenghua had not fought with us three elders, I don't know if he could have killed Kuyo Onaguchi with his strength. Perhaps. Hua Iru smiled bitterly and sighed. He then looked at Nyetian with a playful smile on his face. In fact, he was very satisfied with the current situation. Nye Fenghua did not die, and Nyetian did not leave the Holy Soul Academy. Moreover, what Nyetian had just experienced was very important to him. From today onwards, Nyetian had a greater goal in his heart, so he was more motivated to improve his strength. Chapter 2796. Mission of the Academy. Senior Sidhu, I want to know what happened to my father back then. Outside the Icefire Valley, Nyetian frowned and asked Sidhu Bai. I don't know either. Sidhu Bai shook his head and said, only Kuyo Onaguchi and your father know what happened back then. Kuyo Onaguchi was the one who made your father a traitor of the Academy. I've never dealt with your father before, but I can feel from our battle just now that he's definitely not the scum that Kuyo Onaguchi said. There must be something hidden about what happened back then. Nyetian didn't say anything for a long while. Brother Sidhu, I think you're badly injured. I'm afraid you'll need to recuperate for a while. At this time, Hua Iru looked at Sidhu Bai and said in a deep voice, Yes. Sidhu Bai nodded and said with a bitter smile, Nye Fenghua is indeed the #1 genius of the Holy Soul Academy in millions of years. Even though the three of us joined forces and used the Saint Soul secret technique, we still lost to him. Grandma Tang and Old are more seriously injured than me. They've already gone back to recuperate. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. I'm afraid I won't be able to protect Nyetian during this period. Brother Sidhu, I've troubled you enough these days. Don't worry and cultivate in seclusion. I'll take care of Nyetian. Hua Iru said with a faint smile. Yes. Situ Bai nodded again and looked at Nietan, saying, Nietian, you can come to the Ice Fire Valley to cultivate at any time. Even if I cultivate in seclusion, others won't dare to set foot in the Ice Fire Valley. You can cultivate in peace. Thank you, Senior Situ. Nietian bowed and expressed his gratitude. Yes. Situ Bai nodded with a smile and left without staying any longer. Nietian looked at Situ Bai's figure with a strange expression. He thought to himself, Senior Situ is already a peak pseudo-sacred expert, and yet he's so respectful of Father. It seems like Father is indeed very strong. When he came out of the Ice Fire Lake, Nie Fenghua was already seriously injured, so he didn't get to see Nie Fenghua's heroic posture in battle. He could only speculate that Nie Fenghua's strength should be similar to that of Kuyo Onaguchi, but compared to Eternally Merciless, she was definitely far inferior. Elder Hua, who is Senior Eternally Merciless? At this moment, Nietian couldn't help but frown as he thought of Eternally Merciless. Eternally Merciless is a mythical existence. I don't know much about him. Hua Iru shook his head and smiled. I'm afraid that no one in the entire Sacred Soul region, or even the entire Myriad Domains, truly understands Eternally Merciless. Nietian was stunned and puzzled. He didn't know why Nie Fenghua was involved in such a matter. Eternally Merciless was indeed very strange. He wasn't a saint, but his battle strength gave people the feeling that he was even more terrifying than a saint. Perhaps his sword Dao had already broken through to the Paramount Saint realm. In the Sacred Soul region, the martial arts realm was limited by the world level, and it was impossible to break through to the Saint realm. However, the Sword Principle realm was more about the comprehension of sword intent, and it was less limited by the world. It was not impossible to break through to the Saint realm Sword Principle. Nietian's Sword Principle cultivation was only at the peak of sword and martial unity. It was still too weak, and he hadn't even touched the transcending God realm. Nietian, you're now at the peak of the God realm, right? At this moment, Hua Iru's eyes trembled, and he couldn't hide his joy. Yes, I just broke through. Nietian smiled faintly. Very good. Huapeng nodded. He was even more excited than Nietian. He had never imagined that Nietian would advance from the peak of the Paramount God realm to the peak of the God realm in less than a month after coming to the Sacred Soul region. That kind of advancement speed was freakish. Nietian, you need to stabilize your cultivation for the time being. I'll assign you a mission from the Institute soon. Huayra looked at Nietian and smiled faintly. Yes, Nietian nodded. He really needed to stabilize his cultivation. Then, Nietian said a few words to Hua Iru and returned to the Ice Fire Valley. Huayru looked at Nietian and smiled faintly. Nietan, you can only succeed in the Institute's mission, he said inwardly. I need you to get something that has a lot to do with the power of the stars inside of you. Now that you've awakened the power of 900 billion stars, it's time for you to gain enlightenment of the true power of the stars. Nietian had awakened the power of 900 billion stars, but he couldn't unleash the full power of the stars. The main reason was that his comprehension of the star force was still too rough. He had yet to grasp the basics. Huapeng would guide Nietian in gaining enlightenment of the power of the stars. As long as Nietian could gain enlightenment of the power of the stars, his battle prowess would experience another qualitative leap. Hua Iru smiled faintly and left without further ado. Meanwhile, in the Ice Fire Valley, Nietian went to the Ice Fire Lake. He had just broken through to the peak of the God realm, and his martial body had been greatly strengthened. He needed to stabilize and adapt. After the breakthrough, Nietian hadn't experienced many changes. He had awakened 32 types of Fiend God power, but the 9 Apex War God incantation was still at the first level. If he wanted to break through to the second level, 9 Apex War God incantation, he would have to wait until he advanced to the Half-Sage realm. Lulu absorbed a large amount of Saint Spirit Flame and also absorbed the Saint Spirit Furnace. He needed a period of time to refine it. After he completely refined these powers, Nietian could absorb them. Lulu said that with these powers, It would be enough for Nye Tian to break through to the half-sage realm. Therefore, although Nye Tian had just broken through to the peak of the god realm, he was not far from breaking through to the half-sage realm. Nye Tian quickly entered a cultivation state in the Ice-Fire Lake. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. In the Ice-Fire Valley, Nye Tian had just walked out of the Ice-Fire Lake. At this time, the aura around him was extremely sharp. His entire person was like an unsheathed sword, revealing a sharp edge. With my current strength, I'm already not weaker than a half-sage expert. I'm afraid a weaker half-sage would be instantly killed by me. Nye Tian murmured while feeling the aura in his body. Although he had yet to reach the half-sage realm, his battle strength was stronger than a low-level half-sage, and he could even fight against a high-level half-sage. Boss! At that instant, a voice was heard from outside the Ice-Fire Valley. Zhu Shan. Nye Tian's eyes glistened as he recognized the voice to be Zhu Shan's. He walked out and saw the Zhu Shan and Zhu brothers. The two brothers were extremely excited to see him. Shanha, why are you looking for me? Nye Tian asked with a faint smile. Boss, Elder Hua has asked us to pay a visit to the outer domain hall. Zhu Shan stepped forward and said excitedly. Sure, Nye Tian answered, a faint smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. He guessed that Hua Iru must have arranged a task for him. The trio did not waste any time. They immediately left the Ice-Fire Valley and headed to the outer domain hall. As they arrived at the outer domain hall, everyone gave Nye Tian strange looks along the way. It could even be described as vicious, as if Nye Tian had killed their fathers. Nye Tian didn't pay any attention to these people and walked straight towards the great hall of the outer court. Following this, Nye Tian and the others arrived at the square outside the outer domain hall. As soon as they entered the square, another figure appeared at the same time. The figure stared at Nye Tian and was startled before his expression darkened, and he spoke in a cold tone. Hold it right there. Nye Tian frowned and glanced at the figure before saying in a deep voice, What's up? Jing Hong. Zhu Shan and Zhu, he glanced at the figure and uttered his name after a slight hesitation. The Shana brothers were extremely familiar with the person before them. He was one of the outer domain 10 tigers, Jing Hong. Chapter 2797. Jing Hong said coldly. His eyes were arrogant and ruthless as he stared at Nye Tian, as if the latter was his most hated enemy. Jing Hong's words made Nye Tian's face darken. His eyes were filled with anger and killing intent. Jing Hong, what are you yelling for? F***CK off. Zhu Shan felt that Nye Tian's expression wasn't right, so he roared and shouted, Boss, let's not lower ourselves to a mad dog's level. Zhu he pulled Nye Tian, afraid that the latter would kill Jing Hong out of impulse. Nye Tian's face was gloomy like a block of ice, cold and murderous. But he didn't move. He was controlling himself. Zhu Shan, Zhu he, are you two idiots? Everyone in the academy knows that this brat is the son of the traitor Nye Fenghua, yet you still call him boss. Could it be that the two of you want to be traitors as well? Jing Hong sneered, his attitude becoming even more arrogant. Jing Hong, you better shut up. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Zhu Shan's face darkened as he roared cold. Jing Hong's mouth twitched. He sneered, Zhu Shan, Zhu he, when the outer courtyard's main square. Do you dare to attack me? St. Soul Academy had a rule that students were forbidden from fighting. If there was a grudge that couldn't be resolved, it could be resolved in the life and death arena. Let's go. Zhu Shan frowned. He wanted to say something, but Nye Tian's low voice was heard. Okay, we'll ignore the mad dog. Zhu he was more flexible. He agreed and prepared to leave. Nye Tian didn't do anything, but it didn't mean he wasn't angry. He just didn't want to waste time on a mad dog. The entire academy was filled with people like Jing Hong. If he fought with every single one of them, he would die of exhaustion. Seeing that Nye Tian and the others were about to leave, Jing Hong sneered and shouted, The son of a traitor is a coward. You'll be just like your traitor father in the future. You'll be a scum. The sound of provocation caused Nye Tian's eyes to freeze, and he stopped moving. The flames in his eyes could no longer be suppressed. He abruptly turned around and said in a cold tone, What did you say? Jing Hong looked at Nie Tian and suddenly felt the cold, murderous intent in the latter's eyes. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He actually felt a great threat, like a little sheep being stared at by a wolf. He was curious why a second-stage half-saint like him would feel threatened by a martial artist at the peak of the godly realm. But in the next moment, he calmed down and thought to himself, it must have been an illusion just now. Humph. Then he sneered and said, Kid, if I say your father is a scum, then you'll be a scum in the future too. Boom. When Jing Hong finished speaking, the anger in Ye Tian's eyes could no longer be controlled. It was instantly released like a volcano that had been suppressed for a long time. His aura instantly enveloped the entire area. In an instant, Jing Hong felt a murderous intent lock onto him, making him feel helpless and hopeless. Boss! Zhu Shan and Zhu, he also sensed that something was wrong and shouted in unison. Unfortunately, it was already too late. You're asking for it. In the next moment, Nie Tian let out a fierce roar and pounced forward like a wild beast. At that moment, Jing Hong's eyes trembled violently. He actually felt a bone-chilling coldness. It was the aura of death. Boss, don't kill him. Zhu Shan and Zhu, he were so scared that their faces trembled and they shouted. QL11, after all, they were in the school and on the square of the outer court. If Nie Tian killed Jing Hong, he would definitely be breaking the school's taboo. He had previously killed Tian Zhuowen and Chun Shuaibin, but not many people knew about it. The situation now was very different. More importantly, Jing Hong's identity was not simple. He was the prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty. Uft, uft. At that moment, Nie Tian arrived at Jing Hong's side, less than 5 meters away from him. Sword intent surged madly around him, morphed into 2 sharp blades, and shot out, leaving 2 deep cuts on Jing Hong's face. The cuts were so deep that bones could be seen. At the moment when the blades landed, Nie Tian's figure also stopped. His eyes were like sharp blades as he stared at Jing Hong, as if he could pierce through his soul. Jing Hong was stunned. He suddenly screamed and then shouted crazily, I'm not dead. At that moment, he had already felt a fatal crisis. He thought that he was dead, but Nie Tian actually held back and did not kill him. He could not imagine how Nie Tian, who was only at the peak of the godly state, could explode with such a powerful and threatening force in an instant. In his despair, he actually forgot to defend himself. Phew! Zhu Shan's eyes trembled. Seeing that Jing Hong was still alive, he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. His heart, that was hanging in his throat, was finally relieved. F*CK. What's that smell? At that moment, Zhu He frowned and looked at Jing Hong with a look of disdain. Jing Hong was also stunned. Only then did he realize that his thighs were wet and hot, and there was a pungent smell of urine in the air. He was so scared that he wet his pants. Let's go. At that moment, Nie Tian did not even look at Jing Hong and turned to leave. *T. Imbecile. Zhu Shan and Zhu, he each said this and followed closely behind Nie Tian. You. Jing Hong's eyes trembled. He seemed to want to say something, but his lips trembled for a long time. In the end, he did not dare to speak. Wah! Only when Nie Tian's group of 3 had walked far away did Jing Hong suddenly touch the 2 bloody sword scars on his face and unexpectedly burst into tears. At this moment, he must be missing his mother. Boss, you were so cool just now. Those 2 sword marks were even more satisfying than killing Jing Hong. Zhu Shan followed behind Nie Tian and laughed heartily. Boss, that little bastard called Jing Hong. Usually, he uses his family background to look down on others. This time, he was taught a lesson. Ha ha ha. Zhu, he was even happier now. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, but his face did not show much emotion. The reason why he did not kill Jing Hong was to show others that the 2 sword marks on Jing Hong's face would tell others that this was the result of provoking him, Nie Tian. Although this method was a little cruel, at least it would give Nie Tian peace and quiet. There would be fewer idiots who would come looking for death. At that moment, the 3 of them arrived at the outer court's main hall and walked in. Nie Tian, you're here. Just as they entered the main hall, a familiar voice rang out. carrying with it a coldness that had not changed for 1,000 years. Ji Cho-woo. Nye Tian's gaze froze as he saw a familiar mask. It was none other than the number 1 outer sect disciple, Ji Cho-woo. Ji Cho-woo, why are you here? Jushan saw Ji Cho-woo and couldn't help but be stunned. Chapter 2798. A disdainful voice was heard, causing the Shanha brothers to be taken aback. Then, they looked at the person who spoke. It was a young martial artist. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was extraordinarily handsome, and his gaze was extremely sharp. However, his gaze was filled with arrogance and contempt. The Shanha brothers were obviously unhappy to be called a pair of fools. Their faces immediately turned livid. Lu Fengming, call another one. Zhu Shan took a step forward, glared at the other party, and shouted his name. This young martial artist was called Lu Fengming. He was considered a prominent figure in the outer sect. His strength was at the 8th rank of half-sage, second only to Ji Cho-woo. He was ranked second among the 10 tigers of the outer sect. He was even stronger than Shan Shuaibin, who died in the hands of Nye Tian. Shanha duo, idiot. Lu Fengming's face was full of arrogance as she enunciated each word clearly. She was extremely arrogant. Good son, you're so obedient. Father asked you to call, so call. Zhu Shan smiled and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He was very proud. Zhu Shan, Lu Fengming's eyes trembled. Only now did he realize that he was tricked. He couldn't help but growl in anger. Lu Fengming, what do you want? Do you think we're afraid of you? The Shanha brothers took a step forward at the same time. Their imposing manner was very strong, forcing Lu Fengming to take a step back. Lu Fengming was ranked second among the 10 tigers of the outer sect. Zhu Shan and Zhu He were ranked 4th and 5th respectively. If it was a one-on-one fight, Zhu Shan and Zhu He would not be a match for Lu Fengming. But if the Shanha brothers joined forces, perhaps only Ji Cho would have a chance to fight against them in the entire outer court. Lu Fengming's eyes were extremely gloomy. He was resentful, but he didn't dare to make a move. At the next moment, his eyes suddenly turned and locked onto Nye Tian. He then sneered and said in a strange tone, "Oh, isn't this silver-haired boy the son of the traitor Nye Fenghua?" Nye Tian frowned. His pair of cold eyes glanced at Lu Fengming, but he didn't say anything. Lu Fengming, that's enough. At this time, Lu Fengming still wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Ji Cho-woo, who said cold, "Nye Tian is my friend. You better be careful what you say." Lu Fengming was stunned for a moment, looking at Ji Cho-woo with a puzzled look, feeling very strange in her heart. The people in the outer court all knew that Ji Cho-woo was an iceberg-like figure, keeping everyone at a distance of 1,000 miles. Why would Ji Cho-woo suddenly say that Nye Tian is her friend? How many days has Nye Tian been at Holy Soul Academy? How could it be related to Ji Cho-woo? Even though she found it strange, Lu Fengming was afraid of Ji Cho-woo and did not dare to say anything more. Ji Cho-woo, what is our mission this time? Why are the strongest people in the outer court here? Zhu Shan ignored Lu Fengming and asked Ji Cho-woo. I'm not sure either. Ji Cho-woo shook her head. She had the same doubts in her heart. Just what kind of academy mission was it that required the strongest people in the outer court to gather together? Just when everyone was filled with doubts, another 2 warriors came into the hall. Among them, there was one that Nye Tian was also very familiar with. It was Ji Chun, who he had fought with before. Ji Chun was also one of the 10 tigers in the outer court. It was not strange for him to appear here. The other person was a warrior who looked very honest. After he arrived, he did not say a word and kept silent the whole time. Ji Chun. Seeing Ji Chun walk over, Nye Tian faintly smiled and greeted. Ji Chun only nodded his head, then glanced at Ji Cho-woo as if he wanted to say something, but did not say it. Nye Tian noticed this scene and could not help but frown. He could tell that there seemed to be an extraordinary relationship between Ji Cho-woo and Ji Chun. Following that, everyone waited in the hall. After a moment, a figure walked over. It was actually another person that Nye Tian was familiar with, the teacher of the inner court, Bairuaju. She's not a teacher of the inner court. Why is she here? Nye Tian looked at Bairuaju and could not help but frown, saying in his heart, "Students, Sorry to keep you waiting. Bairuaju came in front of everyone, her gaze sweeping across everyone, and she faintly smiled. Today, I called you all here to give you a heaven-class mission. Heaven-class mission. When everyone heard these words, their eyes could not help but tremble, and they cried out in surprise. The missions of the Holy Soul Academy were divided into heaven, earth, mystic, and yellow classes according to the level. The higher the level of the mission, the more points one could obtain after completing it. Generally speaking, the disciples of the outer court could only carry out yellow class missions and, at most, low-level mystic class missions. They had never heard of letting the disciples of the outer court carry out heaven-class missions. Heaven-class missions were generally very dangerous, and only the disciples of the inner court dared to accept them. As for high-level heaven-class missions, only the few people on the Hidden Dragon list dared to accept them. At this moment, it was really too strange for Bairuaju to let a group of disciples of the outer court carry out a heaven-class mission. Yes, you did not hear wrongly. You are to carry out a heaven-class mission. Bairuaju had already expected everyone's reaction. She faintly smiled and said, "Your mission this time is very special. You are to act as the bodyguards of the eldest princess of the Holy Moon Empire." Bodyguards? Everyone was stunned, and their faces were filled with astonishment. Who would have thought that the mission this time was for them to be bodyguards? In 3 days, the eldest princess of the Holy Moon Empire will be married into the Xiantian Empire. We need a few young bodyguards to accompany the eldest princess to the Xiantian Empire. Bairuaju faintly smiled and continued, "Your mission is to protect the eldest princess and safely arrive at the imperial capital of the Xiantian Empire." So that's how it is. After hearing this, Lu Fengming laughed and said, "The rules of the Holy Spirit region state that the bodyguards must be very young and cannot be older than 800 years old. Therefore, we can only let the strongest people of the outer court be the bodyguards." At this moment, the corner of Nietian's mouth twitched, and he also understood. The bodyguards obviously had to be young cultivators. If a group of old antiques accompanied the princess, it would indeed be somewhat inappropriate. The others also understood and nodded one after another. At this moment, Bairuaju nodded slightly, but her expression became much more solemn. She said, "You all know that the Holy Moon Empire and the Xiantian Empire are both the 4 great empires of the Holy Spirit region. This marriage between the 2 empires is a major event of the Holy Spirit region. Therefore, although your mission this time seems easy, it is actually very important. I hope that you all treat it with caution and don't embarrass the Holy Spirit Academy." "Of course." Lu Fengming spoke again and then looked at Nietian. She said, "Teacher, I don't think we should let the son of a traitor participate in such an important academy mission." Nietian's gaze suddenly froze, and his expression darkened. This Lu Fengming had been targeting him at every turn, and this was not the first time. Could it be that if he tolerated a little, she would think that he was easy to bully? "Student, please watch your words." At this moment, Bairuaju spoke, and her beautiful eyes turned slightly cold. She said, "Whoever the Academy chooses to carry out the mission is the Academy's business, and no one else is allowed to interfere. Since you have joined this mission, your responsibility is to do your best to complete the mission and not to care about who is carrying out the mission with you." As the cold voice fell, it was like a slap on Lu Fengming's face, causing his entire body to stiffen. His expression fluctuated between green and red, and he did not dare to say anything more. He did not think that Bairuaju would actually be biased towards Nietian. Bairuaju's pretty face turned slightly cold, and she did not say anything more. At this moment, several figures appeared outside the main hall, and they strode into the main hall. Chapter 2799. The Prince of the Holy Moon Kingdom. Several figures walked over from the main hall of the outer court. Everyone in the hall could not help but look over. The person in the lead was a young warrior. He was slightly plump and had delicate features. His eyes revealed a sense of determination. He wore a long golden robe that looked luxurious and bright, and his body exuded an innate nobility. Behind this person were 2 middle-aged men. Their faces were stern, and they did not speak or smile. Beside the nobleman was another person. It was a face that Nye Tian was familiar with. It was Jing Hong, who had provoked him before. "Your Royal Highness, the second prince." Bairuoju looked at the nobleman and hurriedly walked over and called out. This noble young man was the second prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty, Jing Rue. "Ms. Bai." Jing Rue smiled faintly, appearing very respectful. Everyone's eyes were focused on Jing Rue, and their faces were full of joy. In the Holy Soul Domain, the four great dynasties were existences that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Holy Soul Academy. And the Holy Moon Dynasty was one of the four great dynasties. This time, the second prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty had personally come to the Holy Soul Academy to select the eldest princess's bodyguard. It was enough to show how much importance the Holy Moon Dynasty placed on this marriage. "Second brother, it's this brat who injured me." At this moment, Jing Hong suddenly spoke. He stared at Nye Tian with a pair of vicious eyes and shouted hysterically. Everyone was shocked by Jing Hong's voice and looked over. Just now, everyone's attention was focused on Jing Rue and did not look at Jing Hong at all. Only now did they see the two sword marks on Jing Hong's face. They were so obvious and glaring. Nye Tian's sword was very strong, and he had just used the power of the divine demon. Therefore, the sword marks on Jing Hong's face would not disappear without a few months' time. "Oh no!" Zhu Shan and Zhu, he looked at Jing Hong, and at the same time, their eyes trembled and they cried out in their hearts. Jing Hong was the 37th prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty. Although he was not valued in the dynasty, he was still a prince. Nye Tian leaving two sword marks on his face was like a slap to the Holy Moon Dynasty's face. Bairuoju glanced at Jing Hong and then at Nye Tian. She immediately understood what was going on, and her expression became extremely awkward. "Your Royal Highness, this matter." After thinking for a moment, Bairuoju stepped forward, ready to help Nye Tian handle this matter. But before she could finish, Jing Rue directly waved his hand and interrupted her. Jing Rue took a step forward. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as he ran his gaze up and down Nye Tian's body, but he didn't say a word. The scene was silent. Everyone's hearts were in their throats, and no one dared to make any sound. No one knew what Jing was thinking at Hong's words. While Jing Rue was looking at Nye Tian, the latter was also looking at him. Nye Tian's gaze tightened as he stared at Jing Rue, thinking to himself, "This person is not old, but he is very powerful. He is actually a demi-saint. His gaze is deep and complicated, and he is extremely shrewd. He is definitely not a simple person." After a long time, Jing Rue finally opened his mouth, a smile on his lips. He looked at Nye Tian and asked, "The sword mark on Jing Hong's face, was it you who left it?" "Yes." Nye Tian didn't hide anything and responded calmly without the slightest nervousness. "Can I know why?" Jing Rue frowned in surprise. He hadn't expected Nye Tian to be so calm. "You should ask him," Nye Tian replied calmly. "Second brother, this brat is the son of Saint Soul Academy's biggest traitor, Nye Fenghua. I only said a bit, but he was enraged. He left a sword scar on my face. By humiliating me like this, he's provoking our Holy Moon Dynasty." Jing Hong could no longer hold it in and stepped forward with an agitated expression. "Shut up." However, Jing Rue suddenly turned around and fiercely glared at Jing Hong. Jing Hong was so frightened that he shrank back a few steps and almost fell. Everyone was also stunned. They didn't know what was going on. Logically speaking, Nye Tian leaving a sword scar on Jing Hong's face was a great humiliation. Jing Rue should be very angry and want nothing more than to kill Nye Tian. But why was Jing Rue scolding Jing Hong instead? Nye Tian was also very puzzled. He didn't know what Jing Rue was planning. "Your Lord Nye Fenghua's son?" Jing Rue suddenly laughed and asked calmly. Nye Tian's gaze froze. He was even more puzzled, but he still nodded. When Jing Rue mentioned Nye Fenghua, he used honorifics, as if expressing goodwill to Nye Tian. "You Nye Tian, right?" Jing Rue said with a smile again. Nie Tian nodded again and said, "Your Royal Highness, if you have anything to say, just say it." Nie Tian's attitude took everyone by surprise. At this moment, Jing Rui was very respectful, but Nie Tian seemed a little impatient. To others, Nie Tian's current actions seemed a little arrogant. No matter what, Jing Rui was the second prince of the Holy Moon Empire. His status was extremely noble. Moreover, it was rumored that Jing Rui was one of the few princes in the Holy Moon Empire who had the ability to compete for the throne. In other words, Jing Rui could become the Holy Moon Emperor in the future. This status was comparable to the Dean of the Holy Soul Academy. Nie Tian's cold reaction was indeed a little arrogant. However, what happened next made everyone's jaws drop. Jing Rui wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "Nie Tian, Jing Hong is young and ignorant. He doesn't know what to say and does things too rashly. As his brother, I apologize on his behalf. I hope you could be magnanimous and not lower yourself to his level." His calm voice caused the crowd to be stunned. Everyone was petrified and looked at Jing Rui with their mouths agape. They seemed to think that they had heard wrongly. The most surprised person was Jing Hong. His eyes were wide open, and his expression seemed to be saying, "Second brother, am I your younger brother, or is he your younger brother?" Nie Tian didn't expect Jing Rui's words. He frowned and didn't know what to say. However, he could tell that Jing Rui wasn't the kind of person who was truly tolerant. He was acting so respectfully at this moment, so he definitely had other intentions. "Nie Tian, the matter between you and Jing Hong should end here. What do you say?" Jing Rui looked at Nie Tian and said again, "Since Second Prince has said so, of course I have no objections." Nie Tian nodded and responded calmly. No matter whether Jing Rui's current actions were sincere or not, Nie Tian had to return the courtesy. Otherwise, it would be a little unreasonable. "Thank you." Jing Rui smiled. His eyes flickered as he looked at Nie Tian and sincerely said, "Brother Nie, this prince has a small request that I hope Brother Nie can agree to." When everyone heard Jing Rui's words, their expressions that had just softened a little froze again. Jing Rui actually called Nie Tian Brother Nie. This was undoubtedly admitting that in his eyes, Nie Tian was on the same level as him. What was going on? "Your Highness is too polite." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and said, "If your Highness has any requests, please tell me. If Nie Tian can do it, I will not refuse." Jing Rui's current attitude forced Nie Tian to be more polite. Chapter 2800. Chapter 2795. Chapter 2, 795. Head of the Bodyguard Corps. As Jing Rui's voice fell, the entire hall once again fell into a deathly silence. Everyone's expressions were stiff, their eyes lifeless, completely clueless as to what was happening in front of them. Nie Tian left 2 sword marks on the face of the 37th Prince Jing Hong, humiliating him. And as Jing Hong's imperial brother, not only did Jing Rui not take revenge on Nie Tian, he even took the initiative to apologize, even calling Nie Tian brother, and even offered to let Nie Tian be the head of the Bodyguard Corps. Why did this scene in front of them feel like a dream? Everyone even wondered if the second prince's IQ was low enough. Nie Tian looked at Jing Rui, his eyes also filled with doubt. He really couldn't understand why Jing Rui would let him be the head of the Bodyguard Corps. Of all the bodyguards present, besides Nie Tian, they were all half-step saints. Only Nie Tian was at the peak of the God realm. If Jing Rui saw that Nie Tian could injure Jing Hong and took a fancy to his battle prowess, then it didn't make sense. After all, Ji Cho Wu and Lu Fengming were stronger. One was a 9-step half-saint, the other an 8-step half-saint. Their battle prowess couldn't be any weaker than a peak God realm martial artist. What did Jing Rui's current actions mean? "Brother Nie, are you willing to accept this prince's proposal?" Seeing that Nie Tian didn't speak, Jing Rui smiled faintly and asked again. "Your Highness, Nie Tian just joined the academy not long ago." At this time, without waiting for Nie Tian to speak, Bairaju took a step forward and said, "This marriage between the 2 empires is of great importance. Nie Tian really can't bear this responsibility." As she spoke, she pointed at Ji Cho Wu and said, This disciple is called Jicho Wu, the strongest of our Saint Soul Academy's outer court. It's more suitable for her to be the head of the bodyguard corps. After Bai Ruoju finished speaking, Jing Rue smiled faintly and said, Teacher Bai, this time's bodyguard mission will be fully handled by this prince. This prince knows very well who will be the leader of the bodyguards. As he spoke, he looked at Ji Qiuwu and laughed. This student Ji Qiuwu's strength is admittedly not bad, but she can't take off the mask on her face. It's really difficult for her to be the head of the escort group. Bai Ruoju's expression stiffened, after which she turned to look at Lu Fengming and said, This disciple is Lu Fengming, an expert second only to Ji Qiuwu in the outer sect. He doesn't have a mask on his face, so he could be the group leader. Yes, Your Royal Highness, I can be the leader. Lu Fengming's eyes lit up as she stepped forward. However, Jing Rue did not even look at Lu Fengming. Instead, he calmly and firmly said, Teacher Bai, there's no need to say another word. This king has already made up his mind. The position of Guardian Squad's leader belongs to Nie Tian. Bai Ruoju saw that Jing Rue was very determined, and there was no room for discussion. She could not help but look embarrassed. Since Your Royal Highness is so insistent, if Nie Tian continues to decline, it would seem that he doesn't know what's good for him. At this time, Nie Tian finally spoke. He calmed down and smiled faintly. Nie Tian is willing to take on the position of Guardian Squad's leader. Good. Hearing that Nie Tian had agreed, Jing Rue laughed and actually bowed slightly. Thank you, Brother Nie. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said no more. Teacher Bai, it's decided then. This king is preparing to bring Brother Nie and the others to Holy Moon Imperial City right now. Jing Rue smiled faintly and said directly, Right now? Bai Ruoju was startled. She did not expect it to be so urgent. Yes. Jing Rue nodded. Royal Sister will be heading to Xiantian Dynasty in 3 days. This king wants to bring Brother Nie and the others to meet her in advance. The Royal Sister he spoke of was, of course, the Royal Highness of Holy Moon Dynasty, the person who is about to marry into Xiantian Dynasty. All right, if that's the case, then you can all set off. Bai Ruoju hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. Then, Nie Tian and the others did not delay any further and directly followed Jing Rue to Holy Moon Imperial City. Holy Moon Dynasty was one of the 4 great dynasties of the Divine Heaven region, and it was also the dynasty closest to Holy Soul Academy. It was only half a day's journey from Holy Soul Academy to Holy Moon Imperial City. Half a day later, Nie Tian and the others arrived outside Divine Heaven City. What a magnificent imperial city! Nie Tian looked at the majestic imperial city in the distance and exclaimed in his heart. This was the first time he had seen a large city of the Divine Heaven region. Whether it was in terms of aura or size, it was much larger than the cities he had seen before. Let's go. Jing Rue smiled faintly and led Nie Tian and the others into the imperial city. Soon, they arrived at King Rue's residence where the second prince lived. Under Jing Rue's arrangement, they temporarily lived in a spacious courtyard. Jing Rue let the others rest first, then brought Nie Tian alone to the great hall of the residence. Brother Nie, have some tea. Jing Rue sat on the main seat of the great hall, smiled faintly, and gestured for Nie Tian to drink. Nie Tian, however, waved his hand and said with a plain tone, Your Highness, if there's anything you want to say, just say it. He always felt that this second prince looked very respectful, but was actually very gloomy and shrewd. He didn't know what he was thinking. Brother Nie, you are the leader of the bodyguards this time. There are some things that I need to discuss with you. Jing Rue smiled faintly, and then actually really discussed the bodyguards with Nie Tian. The two talked for a long time, including the route to the Xiantian Dynasty. Who else should they bring besides the bodyguards? After discussing everything, several hours had passed. Brother Nie, tonight I will bring you into the palace to see my royal sister and also to welcome you. Finally, Jing Rue smiled faintly and said solemnly, I can see Her Royal Highness in advance, but there's no need for a welcome dinner. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said in a low voice, No need to be nervous, Brother Nie. It's just having a meal with my royal sister. Jing Rue laughed and said, Brother Nya, go back and rest first. I will send someone to call you when it's time to leave. All right. Nya Tian nodded and stood up to leave the great hall. On the way back to the courtyard, he had a puzzled look on his face. He really couldn't understand what this second prince was up to. He had a feeling that Jing Rue had some unspeakable secret, but the latter hid it so deeply that not even a drop of water could leak out. Don't worry about him for now. I just need to complete my mission of protecting my family. Unable to understand, Niet Tian could only shake his head with a wry smile and give up. After returning to the courtyard, Niet Tian entered his room and abruptly sensed something, causing his expression to change. He actually discovered that there was already a person sitting in the room. Ji Cho Wu, why are you in my room? Niet Tian was startled for a moment, then immediately calmed down and asked Ji Cho Wu. The person in his room was none other than Ji Cho Wu. I was waiting for you. Ji Cho Wu spoke faintly, his voice actually no longer so cold, and even somewhat gentle and sweet. HM. Niet Tian could hear that something was wrong with Ji Cho Wu's voice. He couldn't help but narrow his gaze, a strange expression on his face. If this sweet voice came from another woman's mouth, Niet Tian would feel that it was very normal. But coming from Ji Cho Wu's mouth, it was very strange. Chapter 2801. Chapter 2796. Chapter 276. What? When Niet Tian heard Ji Cho Wu's words and saw the latter's actions, his gaze involuntarily narrowed, his entire person stunned for a moment. Previously, Ji Cho Wu fainted once in the Holy Soul Valley. After waking up, her first reaction was to see if anyone touched her mask. It was very clear that under her mask, there were some secrets. But now, she actually took the initiative to remove the mask. Miss Ji, you really want to remove the mask? Niet Tian reacted, his brows furrowed as he asked in a deep voice. If you want to see, I could take off the mask right now. Ji Cho Wu walked over. In her pair of eyes, there was actually no longer the coldness from before. Replacing it was infinite gentleness. In those beautiful eyes that were like water, there was actually a hint of pitifulness. Niet Tian looked at Ji Cho Wu's eyes. His heart could not help but tremble. There was actually a trace of inexplicable palpitation. He had never thought that Ji Cho Wu would actually have this kind of gaze. But the next moment, Niet Tian calmed down and asked solemnly, Miss Ji, just what are you trying to do? Ji Cho Wu took 2 steps forward. He was already less than a meter away from Niet Tian, his body actually emitting a faint fragrance. Niet Tian frowned, immediately feeling that there was something wrong with this fragrance. It actually caused the blood in his body to become irritable, as if even his body was a little hot. Niet Tian, the aura on this woman's body is a little strange. The next moment, Liolio's voice rang out. He immediately released a wave of power, preventing the fragrance from entering Niet Tian's body. Niet Tian instantly felt a lot more awake, his face involuntarily turning gloomy. He looked at Ji Cho Wu cold and said solemnly, Ji Cho Wu, do you know what you are doing? Of course I know. Ji Cho Wu said sweetly. As he spoke, his hand moved, the mask on his face slowly moving away, slowly revealing the face under the mask. Niet Tian frowned, his gaze focusing on one side of Ji Cho Wu's face. Although it was only half a face, it could be seen that her facial features were exquisite, clear, and jade-like, and the outline was almost perfect. One could not help but imagine that if her entire face was revealed, it would definitely be a devastatingly beautiful face. Enough. But at this time, Niet Tian growled, stopping Ji Cho Wu, and said coldly, Ji Cho Wu, if you have nothing else, please leave. It had to be said that Ji Cho Wu's current state was indeed very alluring. Most men would probably find it hard to resist. However, Niet Tian's tenacity was not something an ordinary person could compare to. Furthermore, he felt that Ji Cho Wu's current state was very abnormal. More importantly, he and Ji Cho Wu were not very familiar with each other, and he did not have any improper thoughts towards her. Niet Tian, are you really not tempted? Do you really not want to see my complete face under the mask? Or perhaps take a look at my body? Ji Cho Wu's hand stopped, as he spoke in a sweet voice filled with charm. At this time, Nie Tian could see the gentleness and redness of Ji Cho Wu's face through the exposed half of her face. The Ji Cho Wu at this time was completely different from the Ji Cho Wu that Nie Tian usually saw. It was hard to imagine that these two states would actually appear on the same person. Ji Cho Wu, put on your mask. Nie Tian became cold for a moment, then said solemnly, "Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Ji Cho Wu's beautiful eyes froze, clearly very surprised. But then, she directly put on the mask. The gentleness in her eyes instantly disappeared, directly returning to the previous coldness. Nie Tian, you are indeed an extraordinary person. Ji Cho Wu completely recovered. His voice once again became cold. Nie Tian looked at Ji Cho Wu and couldn't help but be taken aback. The latter changed so quickly that he found it hard to accept. Ji Cho Wu, what did you mean just now? Nie Tian was a little angry. Cold asked. Nothing. I was just testing you. Ji Cho Wu replied coldly. Testing? Nie Tian frowned, asking cold. What do you want to test? Test whether I am a pervert or not. Could it be that in your eyes, I, Nie Tian, am so unbearable? Are you angry? Ji Cho Wu didn't answer Nie Tian's words, but asked back. I treat you as a friend, yet you use this kind of senseless method to test me. Shouldn't I be angry? Nie Tian Lung replied coldly. You can be angry. I was wrong in this matter, sorry. Ji Cho Wu replied indifferently, very calm, as if what just happened did not happen at all. I don't care what you want to do, but right now, we are still friends. Nie Tian frowned, saying cold. If there's nothing else, please leave. Ji Cho Wu's cold eyes trembled slightly. Then he said, Nie Tian, I came to find you to pass on a message from my teacher. Nie Tian was stunned. His expression became even weirder. Heavenly meteorite. Ji Cho Wu spoke again. Teacher wants you to bring this thing to him. With that, her figure flashed and she left. Who is your teacher? Nie Tian was stunned once again. Then he asked, Hua Yiru. Ji Cho Wu said a name, then walked out of the room. When Nie Tian heard this name, he was stunned, unable to react for a long time. He never would have thought that Ji Cho Wu's teacher was actually Hua Yiru. But according to what he knew, Hua Yiru was a divine alchemist, while Ji Cho Wu was a pure martial artist. Was Hua Yiru really Ji Cho Wu's teacher? Nie Tian couldn't react for a moment, standing rooted to the ground for a long time. Ji Cho Wu wouldn't lie to me, right? After a moment, Nie Tian reacted and murmured. According to Ji Cho Wu's personality, he shouldn't lie. But what happened just now was too strange, completely shattering Nie Tian's view of Ji Cho Wu. Nie Tian couldn't determine whether Ji Cho Wu's words were true or false, so he could only treat it as the truth for the time being. But what was the heavenly meteorite? Why did Hua Yiru want such a thing? Nie Tian's mission this time was to escort the royal princess of the Holy Moon Dynasty to the Xintian Dynasty. What did this have to do with the heavenly meteorite? Nie Tian's mind was in a mess. The more he thought, the more confused he became. In the end, he couldn't think of a reason and could only give up. Next, Nie Tian adjusted his mood and started cultivating in the room. Now, he had to seize all the time he could to cultivate hard, and strive to break through to the half-saint realm as soon as possible. Several hours later, the second prince sent someone over to invite Nie Tian and the others. Nie Tian brought the other bodyguards and headed to the hall of the prince's residence. Along the way, Nie Tian secretly observed Ji Cho Wu. The latter actually didn't have the slightest abnormality, as if the previous incident didn't happen at all. After meeting up with the second prince in the hall, everyone didn't waste any time, heading straight to the imperial palace to meet the royal princess. Nie Tian and Jing Rue walked at the forefront. The others followed closely. Brother Nie. Right at this moment, Jing Rue suddenly called out to him via voice transmission. Nie Tian frowned, sweeping a glance at Jing Rue, and then calmly transmitted back, saying, Your Highness, what's the matter? Brother Nie, have you heard of the heavenly meteorite? Jing Rue pretended to be nonchalant, transmitting his voice to Nye Tian to ask, "Heavenly meteorite." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, exclaiming in his heart, his face stiffening. Chapter 28:02. The Tyrannical Crown Prince. When Nye Tian suddenly heard Jing Rue ask about the meteorite stone, his face stiffened, but he immediately recovered and replied, "Your Highness, why are you suddenly asking about this?" Jing Rue looked sincere on the outside, but he was actually shrewd. For him to suddenly ask about the meteorite stone, it must not be simple. It seems that Brother Nye does know about the meteorite stone. I was not wrong about you. Jing Rue did not answer Nye Tian, but laughed and said no more. He was very shrewd and sharp, perfectly capturing Nye Tian's reaction. So he guessed that Nye Tian must know about the meteorite stone. Nye Tian frowned, but seeing that Jing Rue did not say anything more, he did not ask anymore. After a while, under Jing Rue's lead, everyone entered the palace. Princes could enter and leave the palace freely, but it was not easy to bring others into the palace. Jing Rue was one of the few princes who had the Holy Moon Medallion, so he could bring Nye Tian and the others directly into the palace. Then, Jing Rue quickly brought Nye Tian and the others into a hall. "Brother, you're here." In the hall, a gentle and elegant voice sounded, and then a figure walked out from the inner hall. This was a young woman with a devastatingly beautiful appearance. She was graceful and noble, and her entire body exuded a noble aura. Nye Tian looked at the woman and guessed that she should be the eldest princess of the Holy Moon Dynasty. "Sister." When Jing Rue saw the woman, he immediately went up to greet her, extremely respectful. Nye Tian could not help but look at Jing Rue. The latter's attitude this time did not seem fake and was very sincere. It seemed that the eldest princess was very important in Jing Rue's eyes. "Royal sister, let me introduce you. These are the envoys I invited from Saint Spirit Academy to protect you." Jing Rue let Nye Tian and the others come over, then pointed at Nye Tian and said, "This is Nye Tian, the head of the bodyguards I personally appointed." The eldest princess nodded slightly and looked at Nye Tian, smiling but not saying anything. Nye Tian bowed slightly to show his respect. He could tell that this eldest princess was a very intelligent woman. Her beautiful eyes contained a hidden wisdom. What surprised Nye Tian even more was that he could not sense the Princess Royal's aura at all. It was as if the latter was not a martial artist, but just an ordinary person. It seemed that the eldest princess had used a special method to restrain her aura to the extreme. Following that, Jing Rue introduced the others to the eldest princess one by one. The eldest princess only responded with a smile. "Everyone, please take a seat." The first princess lightly waved her hand and asked Nye Tian and the others to sit down. She then returned to the main seat and said with an elegant smile, "Yu Wei, please forgive me for my poor hospitality." "Princess Royal Highness, what are you talking about? We are all country people, and we are unbearably vulgar. If we have done anything wrong, please forgive us, Princess Royal Highness." Lu Fengming stood up and responded. On the surface, she said it very well. Nye Tian smiled faintly. If someone liked to say such polite words, he naturally would not stop them. He did not know how to say it anyway. Following that, everyone chatted and laughed, so the atmosphere was not too awkward. From Jing Rue's few words, Nye Tian learned many things. The eldest princess's name was Jing Yue. She was a half-sister with the second prince, Jing Rue. In the imperial family, siblings of the same mother would usually be very close. As for Jing Yue and Jing Rue, their relationship was even deeper than that of ordinary siblings. Their mother had passed away when they were young, and Jing Rue had grown up with Jing Yue. In his eyes, Jing Yue was both an older sister and a mother. Nye Tian found it strange. Such a pair of affectionate siblings could support each other in the imperial palace. Why did Jing Yue have to marry into the Xiantian dynasty? With Jing Yue gone, Jing Rue's position in the imperial palace would be much weaker. Nye Tian. At this moment, Jing Yue suddenly spoke. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Nye Tian, a gentle and elegant smile on her face. She asked, I heard from Jing Rue that your father is Lord Nie Fenghua. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He did not expect Jing Yue to already know about this. It was obvious that Jing Rue had sent someone to inform Jing Yue in advance and learn about the identities of all the bodyguards. Actually, there was nothing strange about this. Jing Yue was going to the Xintian Empire with Nie Tian and the others. Of course, she had to learn about them. Nie Tian smiled faintly and nodded in response. Like father, like son. Lord Nie Fenghua must be very happy to have a son like you. Jing Yue smiled faintly and said calmly, You flatter me, Your Highness. Nie Tian nodded slightly in response. His eyes flashed as he asked, Does Your Highness know my father? Of course. Jing Yue laughed. Lord Nie Fenghua once stayed in the Holy Moon Empire for a period of time, and I was fortunate enough to receive his guidance. Although I was not able to acknowledge him as my master, he is like a teacher in my heart. I see. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect that there would be such a thing between his father and the first princess of the Holy Moon Empire. Jing Yue smiled faintly and said, So it can be said that you and I are fated to meet. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He nodded, but did not speak. He had a feeling that this first princess was definitely not as simple as she looked. Ha ha ha. Yue, Jing Rue, why didn't you inform your brother that you were having a small gathering here? At this moment, a loud laugh rang out, and a figure walked in from outside the main hall. The newcomer was dressed in an embroidered robe and exuded an imposing aura. As he strode in, he gave off a domineering feeling. When Jing Yue and Jing Rue saw this figure, their gazes froze at the same time and their expressions stiffened. They stood up at the same time, walked down from their seats, and said with a smile, I didn't know Your Highness had arrived. Please excuse us for not going out to greet you. When Nie Tian and the others saw Jing Yue and Jing Rue stand up, they also stood up. The figure that suddenly arrived was none other than the crown prince of the Holy Moon Empire, Jing Qinxiang. Jing Qinxiang laughed and waved his hand. Yue, Jing Rue, you're too polite. How many times have I told you not to call me crown prince? Just call me brother. As he spoke, Jing Qinxiang strode over and sat directly on Jing Yue's seat, snatching the main seat. Jing Yue and Jing Rue's expressions darkened slightly, but they did not dare to say anything. When Ye Tian saw this, he could not help but stare. The crown prince's status was indeed higher than that of the first princess and the second prince, but this was the first princess's territory after all. Jing Qinxiang, sitting directly on the main seat, seemed a little overbearing. It was obvious that the crown prince and Jing Yue's politeness was just an act, or even a trick. At this moment, Jing Qinxiang glanced at Jing Yue and Jing Rue and said with a laugh, Yue, Jing Rue, don't just stand there. Sit down quickly. Thank you, Your Highness. Jing Yue and Jing Rue forced a smile and sat down. When Ye Tian and the others saw this, they also sat down. Chapter 28:03. Sit down. Jing Qinxiang's gaze was gloomy and cold, looking at Nye Tian and the others with undisguised contempt. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, and his brows furrowed. The others were also taken aback. Then they looked at Nye Tian. Nye Tian was the leader of the bodyguard group. At this moment, he was the one to decide what to do next. Nye Tian gestured for everyone to stand first, and then looked at Jing Qinxiang with a deep gaze, bowing slightly. Your Highness, can we sit down now? Country bumpkin, don't you know that when you see this prince, you have to kneel? Jing Qinxiang shot a disdainful glance at Nye Tian, then immediately picked up a cup of tea, sipping it as she spoke in an enigmatic tone. Huh? When Nye Tian heard Jing Qinxiang's words, his gaze sank and his expression changed. In the world of martial Dao, the shackles of imperial power and imperial clans were not that heavy. In the world of martial arts, the strong reigned supreme. Whoever had the bigger fist had the most authority. If powerful cultivators like the Holy Soul Dean and the Holy Soul Three Elders came to the Holy Moon Dynasty, they would certainly not kneel to the Holy Moon Emperor. At most, they would bow to show mutual respect. If Nye Tian and the others were from the Holy Moon Dynasty, it might be possible for them to kneel to Jing Qinxiang. However, they were not people of the Holy Moon Dynasty, but of the Holy Soul Academy, so they had no reason to kneel to Jing Qinxiang. Even if the Holy Moon Emperor appeared, Nye Tian and the others would not have to kneel. Jing Qinxiang making Nye Tian and the rest kneel was simply making trouble out of nothing. Your Highness, they're people of Saint Soul Academy. They shouldn't kneel. Jing Rue saw Nye Tian's expression change and immediately stood up, bowing to Jing Qinxiang. Jing Rue, sit down. Jing Qinxiang glanced at Jing Rue and said coldly. Although his tone was calm, it carried a domineering tone that could not be disobeyed. Jing Rue was stunned for a moment, his expression extremely ugly. Your Highness, we are from the Holy Soul Academy, not the Holy Moon Dynasty. Even if you were the Emperor, we would not kneel, let alone the Crown Prince. At this moment, Nye Tian spoke. His response was cold and his attitude was very firm. Finishing, he didn't care about Jing Qinxiang's expression, directly saying to the others, "Let's sit. How dare you?" Just at this moment, Jing Qinxiang suddenly roared furiously. The teacup in her hand directly crushed into powder. Nye Tian frowned, looked cold at Jing Qinxiang, and sat down. Impudent. When Jing Qinxiang saw that Nye Tian had really sat down, she was instantly enraged. She stood up and roared, "Since you've come to the Holy Moon Empire, you must abide by the Empire's rules. When a lowly commoner sees a member of the imperial family, he must kneel." After saying that, he stared at Nye Tian and the others with a gloomy gaze, like a ferocious beast that was about to go berserk at any time. The others were stunned for a moment, standing there, not knowing what to do. At this moment, Nye Tian's expression was calm. He looked at Zhu Shan and Zhu He and said indifferently. Zhu Shan and Zhu He said, "Ah, okay." Zhu Shan and Zhu He responded at the same time, then immediately sat down. Following that, Ji Qiu, Ji Chun, and the others also sat down. At this moment, only Lu Fengming and Feng Yin, who hadn't said a word, were still standing. Bastard! Jing Qinxiang's gaze darkened, and she directly roared. Pointing at Lu Fengming and Feng Yin, she shouted, "Who dares to sit?" Feng Yin's expression was cold. She glanced at Nye Tian, then finally sat down. Only Lu Fengming was left. She seemed to be frightened, and her voice trembled as she said, "Your Highness, I won't sit." Lu Fengming, sit down. However, at this moment, Nye Tian suddenly looked at Lu Fengming. His eyes were extremely gloomy, and he spoke coldly. Lu Fengming could feel the coldness in Nye Tian's eyes, and her body could not help but tremble. Nye Tian's eyes were so frightening that it made people shudder. Lu Fengming's eyes were trembling, but she finally moved and slowly sat down. "Brat, you're courting death." However, at this moment, Jing Qinxiang finally could not hold it in anymore. With a roar, she directly struck out with her palm. A terrifying red light whizzed out and turned into a sharp claw in the air, grabbing at Nye Tian. In an instant, Nye Tian felt a fatal threat, and his eyes could not help but tremble. Jing Qinxiang's strength was very strong. She was already a level 3 demi-saint, and her palm strike was an all-out attack, intending to kill Nye Tian on the spot. Boom! At the moment of life and death, another red light appeared. Like an arrow released from a bow, it was even sharper and fiercer, and it blocked the fatal attack for Nye Tian. Jing Qinxiang's face suddenly darkened, and then he looked at Jing Yue and growled Yue. "Jing Yue, what are you doing?" The person who had saved Nye Tian in that moment of crisis was none other than Jing Yue. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he thought to himself, "This Princess Royal is really not simple. Her aura is almost perfectly concealed, and her strength is even stronger than the Crown Prince's." Jing Yue's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a hint of coldness in her voice as she said, "Your Highness, you seem to have forgotten that this is my place. Nye Tian and the others are my guests, and I must protect their safety." Jing Qinxiang's face darkened, and his eyes became extremely cold. "Your Highness, let's just forget about what happened just now. It won't look good if Father hears about this. Jing Rue said calmly at this moment. He was very smart to use the Holy Moon Emperor to suppress Jing Qinxiang. Aha! Jing Qinxiang was stunned for a few seconds, and then he suddenly laughed and said, "You wei, Jing Rue, I was too reckless just now. Let's all sit." Saying this, he directly sat down, but his eyes were fixed on Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned, and he said to himself, "This crown prince looks reckless, but he's actually very shrewd." Fortunately, the princess royal siblings aren't simple characters. On the surface, this big show was the crown prince making things difficult for Nie Tian and the others. But in fact, it was the crown prince and Jing Youwei's secret struggle. What the imperial family didn't lack was open strife and veiled strife. Seeing Jing Qinxiang sit down, Jing Youwei and Jing Rue also sat down. Jing Rue, are these the bodyguards you brought from Holy Soul Academy? At this time, Jing Qinxiang spoke again, with a face full of disdain and cold. Yes. Jing Rue nodded slightly, very cautious, not knowing what trick Jing Qinxiang would play next. Humph. Jing Qinxiang sneered, and his gaze swept over Nie Tian and the others. Has Holy Soul Academy declined to this point? Besides this masked one, are the others here to make up the numbers? Jing Rue's face darkened, not knowing what to say for a moment. The strength of Nie Tian and the others was indeed not very strong. Besides Ji Cho Wu, who was a 9-step half-sage, the others were below the 9-step half-sage. Especially this silver-haired brat. He's actually a God Realm pinnacle fighter. Don't tell me Holy Soul Academy doesn't have anyone else. They sent a piece of trash. Immediately, Jing Qinxiang pointed at Nie Tian and laughed coldly. Chapter 28:04. Looks good, but useless. Nie Tian's voice was not loud, but Jing Qinxiang's expression froze when he heard it. Kid, what did you say? Jing Qinxiang's mouth twitched after being stunned for a few seconds. I'm the leader of the bodyguard. Nie Tian smiled faintly, neither servile nor overbearing. You're the leader? Jing Qinxiang laughed, then burst into laughter as if he had heard the funniest joke. How could he have imagined that Nie Tian was actually the leader of the bodyguard? Are you done laughing? Nie Tian's expression was calm. After a moment, he asked cold. Jing Qinxiang sensed the disdain in Nie Tian's eyes and finally stopped laughing. He raised his brows and said, I really don't know if the teachers of your Holy Soul Academy are fools or idiots. They actually let a peak, godly realm cultivator be the leader. Isn't this just making the people of the Xiantian dynasty laugh at them? Your Highness, the fool you're talking about is me. But before he finished speaking, Jing Rue spoke up. I was the one who let Nie Tian be the leader of the bodyguard. Jing Qinxiang looked at Jing Rue and was stunned for a moment. He couldn't help but feel a little awkward, but he quickly recovered and laughed. Jing Rue, this marriage is a major event between the Holy Moon Dynasty and the Xiantian Dynasty. You let a peak, godly realm cultivator be the leader of the bodyguard. Isn't this a disgrace to the Holy Moon Dynasty? Your Highness, Imperial Father left the marriage to me. How I decide is my business. Your Highness, don't worry about it, Jing Rue said with a faint smile. Jing Rue, I don't like what you're saying. Jing Qinxiang frowned. Yu Wei is your royal elder sister, and also my royal younger sister. The bodyguard concerns the dignity of the Holy Moon Dynasty. Of course I have to worry. I already guessed that you wouldn't be able to find a suitable bodyguard on this trip to Holy Soul Academy. So I've already made arrangements to find a group of powerful bodyguards for Yu Wei. After saying that, he clapped his hands. Immediately, more than 10 silhouettes appeared outside the main hall, each of them releasing their auras. Jing Rue frowned when he saw this. He did not expect that Jing Qinxiang actually had this move. Your Highness, what you're doing isn't appropriate. Jing Rue's expression darkened. There's nothing wrong with that. As an elder brother, of course I care about my younger sister. Jing Qinxiang smiled faintly, then shouted towards the dozen figures, Come in. Yes. The dozen or so figures responded in unison. Their voices were loud as they walked into the main hall. Nie Tian's gaze swept across these people, and he could not help but frown. These cultivators were all very young, under 1,000 years old. However, they were very strong. The weakest ones were 5th-order half-saints, while the strongest ones were 7th-order half-saints. There were even 2 cultivators with a strength of 9th-order half-saints. When Jing Rue saw these people, his face turned ugly. He did not expect Jing Qinxiang to be able to find so many genius cultivators. Nie Tian and the others were all top-notch geniuses in the entire Saint Soul Academy, but their overall strength was not as good as these dozen or so cultivators. Where did Jing Qinxiang find so many geniuses? Jing Rue, what do you think? These people I found are much stronger than the people you found. Jing Qinxiang laughed proudly. Jing Rue's face darkened, and he became even more embarrassed. He could not understand why so many monstrous geniuses had suddenly appeared in the Saint Moon Empire. However, at this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang in Nie Tian's divine sense. A bunch of embroidered pillows. Pleasant to look at, but useless. Embroidered pillows? Nie Tian was stunned. He did not know what Fat Cat meant. These fellows' auras are very strong, but that's all. Fat Cat laughed and said, I'm guessing that they've taken a divine pill to temporarily increase their auras. In fact, their true strength is at least 5 levels lower than the auras they're displaying now. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect it to be like this. In other words, these cultivators were mostly people who had just entered the half-step saint realm. They only relied on the divine pill to increase their auras, creating a false impression that they were very strong. Your Highness, are these the bodyguards you found? Nie Tian asked with a sneer, his tone extremely disdainful. What? You're not convinced? Jing Chunxiang responded with a sneer, his face full of provocation. Forgive me for being blunt, but in my opinion, these people are all clay chickens and pottery dogs. They can't withstand a single blow. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, his eyes cold and provocative. Brat, aren't you too arrogant? Jing Qinxiang's face instantly darkened. He looked at Nie Tian with an extremely sinister gaze. He was worried that Nie Tian had seen through something. He was very clear about the strength of these people. He had found these people just to put on an act. As long as they could scare Nie Tian's group away, it would be fine. Your Highness, if you think these people are stronger than us, then why don't we have a competition? Nie Tianling's gaze became even more provocative. Competition? Jing Qinxiang was stunned, his eyes flashing with a trace of hesitation. These dozen cultivators were all good to look at, but useless. As long as the strongest person on Nie Tian's side came out, they could completely crush everyone else. Therefore, if they really had a competition, these dozen people would definitely lose. With Jing Rue's intelligence, he saw Jing Qinxiang's hesitation. His gaze flickered and he said, Your Highness, don't tell me these people you've found don't dare to compete. Of course not. Jing Qinxiang immediately said, but then hesitated. He really didn't dare to compete. Your Highness, why don't we do it this way? I'm the leader of the bodyguards. I'll challenge everyone you've brought alone. Then, Nie Tianling sneered and said, domineeringly, If I lose, I'll immediately leave the Holy Moon Dynasty with my subordinates. What? Jing Qinxiang was taken aback. He let out a strange cry and his eyes widened. Brat, you want to challenge these dozen people alone? Yes. Nie Tian nodded, his face full of confidence. As soon as he said that, everyone present froze. The entire hall was dead silent. No one thought that Nie Tian would suddenly say something like that. Yeah, brother Nie, Jing Rue was the first to react. He looked at Nie Tian and stammered. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Your Highness, please believe me. Jing Rue's gaze trembled, speechless, while Jicho Wu and the rest looked at Nie Tian blankly. That expression seemed to be saying, Nie Tian, are you crazy? A peak deity realm cultivator challenging over a dozen half-saints, even a few rank 9 half-saints. What was this if not crazy? But Nie Tian's current state was very normal. Furthermore, he was very calm, giving people a feeling of having a card up his sleeve. In reality, Nie Tian was indeed very confident. With his current strength, he had no pressure facing off against rank 5 half-saints. Chapter 28:05. Make you kneel, brat. You weren't joking just now, right? At this time, Jing Chenxiang reacted, his voice trembling with agitation. Although he knew that these people's strength was not as strong as they revealed, these people were definitely half-sage powerhouses. Nie Tian was only a deity-state pinnacle cultivator. How could he possibly defeat over a dozen half-sage powerhouses? In Jing Chenxiang's view, Nie Tian's current actions were completely courting death. Do I look like I'm joking? Nie Tian laughed instead. Then a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. He looked directly at Jing Chenxiang and said, "Your Highness, if I win, you must also agree to my conditions." "What conditions?" Jing Chenxiang laughed, his face full of pride. He felt that he was bound to win, so he would agree to any condition that Nie Tian raised. "I want you to kneel to me." Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he said indifferently, "What?" Jing Chenxiang was originally very proud, but when he heard Nie Tian's words, his face suddenly darkened, becoming as ugly as one could imagine. He never imagined that the condition that Nie Tian raised was actually to make him kneel. Everyone else was also flabbergasted. They stared at Nie Tian in astonishment, unable to utter a word. Originally, everyone thought that Nie Tian would definitely raise a very harsh condition, such as demanding something valuable from Jing Chenxiang. But they did not expect that he actually wanted Jing Chenxiang to kneel to him. It was very obvious that Jing Chenxiang's matter of forcing Nie Tian and the rest to kneel had angered Nie Tian. So at this moment, Nie Tian wanted revenge. The matter of kneeling was completely different for different people. A spineless person could kneel down at any time, but people with backbone would rather die than kneel. Whether or not Jing Chenxiang had a backbone, Nie Tian didn't know. But Jing Chenxiang's identity determined that he could not casually kneel to others. The crown prince of the Holy Moon dynasty, the heir to the throne, could only kneel to the emperor. How could he kneel to anyone else? "Brat, say that again?" At this time, Jing Chenxiang reacted. Her eyes were gloomy and cold. "My condition is for you to kneel before me." Nie Tian was not afraid at all. He smiled faintly and said calmly, "Impudent." Jing Chenxiang's eyes trembled, and she roared, "Brat, do you know that you are provoking the Holy Moon dynasty?" Nie Tian remained calm as he smiled and said, "Your Highness, you don't need to make a fuss. If you think my conditions are too harsh, you can reject them. But in this way, I'm still the leader of the eldest princess's bodyguards." "You." Jing Chenxiang's gaze was incomparably cold, staring fixedly at Nie Tian, about to spit fire. He was the crown prince, someone who had been respected by everyone since he was a child. No one had ever dared to act so insolently in front of him. "Since your Highness doesn't dare to gamble, then forget it," Nie Tian said with a faint smile. He did not care at all. Jing Yue and Jing Rui's expressions did not look too good either. They did not think that Nie Tian would be so bold. To be honest, if Jing Chenxiang lost and really knelt to Nie Tian, it would indeed be a great humiliation for the Holy Moon dynasty. However, Nie Tian was clearly not targeting the Holy Moon dynasty, but Jing Chenxiang herself. "Your Royal Highness, please take your people and leave," Jing Yue said indifferently at that moment. She did not want Jing Chenxiang to agree to Nie Tian. Ending this matter now was the best outcome. However, Jing Chenxiang looked at Nie Tian with a gloomy gaze. Anger surged in his eyes, and he finally said, "Brat, I agree. This." Everyone's eyes trembled, and they gasped inwardly. Who would have thought that Jing Chenxiang would agree to Nie Tian's request? "Very well." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Then let's go out now. This place is too small. We can't move around." "Okay." Jing Chenxiang growled, and then stepped out of the palace. A moment later, Nie Tian and the others came to the training field of the palace. "Nie Tian, are you confident?" Ji Chou was very worried. He came to Nie Tian's side and asked in a low voice. "Trust me." Nie Tian smiled faintly, his eyes full of confidence. "Boss, be careful." Zhu Shan and Zhu, he came to Nie Tian's side and said worriedly, "Don't worry." Nie Tian nodded with a smile, his expression calm. Lu Fengming's face was gloomy, and she said fiercely in her heart, Nie Tian, you really are an idiot. With your strength at the peak of the immortal state, how can you defeat more than 10 half-saints? Also, the conditions you proposed are even more stupid. You angered the Holy Moon Crown Prince, and you still want to leave the Holy Moon Dynasty alive? Why did I have such a stupid teammate like you? Boy, go on stage. At this time, Jing Qinshiang looked at Nie Tian and said coldly. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. His figure moved, and he directly landed on an arena. His eyes swept across everyone present, and he said loudly, Your Royal Highness, don't forget our agreement. If I win, you have to kneel to me. At this time, there were many people gathered in the training field. Nie Tian said this in public to prevent Jing Qinshiang from acting shamelessly. This crown prince's words carry enormous weight. I don't need you to remind me. Jing Qinshiang roared and shouted, You're going to lose. When the surrounding people heard Nie Tian and Jing Qinshiang's words, they couldn't help but be stunned, their faces full of doubt. What agreement did Nie Tian and Jing Qinshiang have for him to actually have to kneel? On the other side, Jing Yue looked at Nie Tian, her beautiful eyes twinkling with some worry and some anticipation. She had a feeling that Nie Tian would definitely shock her. But at this time, Jing Rue's figure was nowhere to be seen, and no one knew where he went. Your Royal Highness, we're going. One of the warriors behind Jing Qinshiang stood up and said in a deep voice, Kill him for this crown prince. Jing Qinshiang's eyes were gloomy, and she said coldly, Yes, the person replied, and then his figure moved, flying towards the arena. The other dozen people also moved at the same time. More than a dozen figures landed on the arena, directly surrounding Nie Tian. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they couldn't help but tremble, and then they sneered. Am I seeing things? This God State peak trash wants to challenge more than a dozen half-saints at the same time? This kid is an idiot. Is he sure he's not courting death? I've seen idiots, but it's the first time I've seen someone as stupid as this silver-haired brat. Everyone discussed among themselves, looking at Nie Tian as if they were looking at an idiot. Your Royal Highness, look carefully. These dogs of yours are all good-looking but useless trash. At this time, Nie Tian's voice sounded on the arena, very arrogant. Stinking brat, you're simply tired of living. Jing Qinshiang's fists were clenched, and she glared at Nie Tian, wishing to swallow the latter alive. The other's eyes also had a look of contempt, feeling that Nie Tian was just a jumping clown. However, in the next moment, everyone's expressions changed in unison.